Hey there, friends. Welcome to the Daenerys Targaryen Theory Iceberg. It's going to be a great one today. I'm wearing the rose-colored glasses today because that's how I look at Daenerys Targaryen, according to some people, through rose-colored glasses. That's right. She is my favorite character, though. This is going to be an iceberg stream. Icebergs are usually just lists of theories. I have sort of modified the format so that we're sort of building icebergs of ideas that aren't just random pieces of snow, but an actual iceberg, an entire picture, like the Great Empire of the Dawn iceberg. We started simple, and by the time we got to the end, we basically were putting together the entire magical backstory of the story. With the White Walker iceberg, we started small, and we eventually finished up with what the White Walkers want, who they are, what they want, and how to give it to them. So with the Dany iceberg, it's a little different. I've got four big sections, as you can see on the left side of the screen. The first two will be about who Dany is and what kind of mission she's on. There's a personal mission and a personal identity, the character analysis, if you will. And then there's a sort of more magical Azor Ahai theories, prophecies, visions, all her visions, basically, and all the more complex magical ideas. So by the time we're done, you'll have a complete picture of Daenerys Targaryen. And the thing I love about Dany, besides the fact that she's an abolitionist revolutionary, abolitionist revolutionary, is that her, she might be the best example of how Martin takes the personal character struggle of the character and the magical, mythical side and harmonizes them. It really is, and we're going to see that as we get into the stream here. So, abolition is tight. That's true. Shout out to all the abolitionists that brought us where we are today, if you will. So, Dany is the last Targaryen. She is born as the dynasty fell, right? Dany was born on Dragonstone as there was a huge storm, and basically as the dynasty was falling, and she fled from Dragonstone before, doesn't really have any memories of it at all. So she's the last Targaryen, but she's bereft of the entire dynasty. And Viserys is really her only window to her Targaryen heritage, right? She doesn't remember any of the silks, the castles. She hasn't seen a dragon's egg until she's given one. And she only ever hears about that from her brother. And her brother, of course, oh, look at that comment. It's got some complex algebra on there. That's what I think. That's perfect. Viserys is her only window, and he's a crappy window. He's abusive. He's got delusions of grandeur. He never tells her that her father was crazy. He probably doesn't even think their dad was crazy. He doesn't have that view. So he's got a very warped view that was locked into his mind when he was a kid. So he doesn't really know that much. And then he's only pretty much informed by like William Derry and, the couple people that helped him escape. So, and then, much is made about how she's the blood of old Valyria. It's pretty creepy, to be honest, with Illyrio fawning over her, and she's wearing this flimsy dress, and Viserys is, doing some light sexual abuse touching, right? And Illyrio's all, the blood of old Valyria. No doubt. Look at that hair. She'll make us so much money when we sell her to Khal Drogo. That's the introduction to like Dany's Valyrian heritage. There's nothing good about it at the beginning. It's this really messed up thing. And even when Viserys is all like, wake the dragon, that is something that he says when he gets angry and gets ready to abuse Dany. Or anybody else, I guess, the serving women and things like that. So the first chapter gives us a pretty dark introduction to Dany as the last Targaryen. She's disconnected from the glory, and most of what she knows is pretty crappy. And this, of course, let me just call out the artwork real quick, sorry. Sebastian Giancobino on the bottom, and that is Viserys, of course, about to be killed by Drogo. After committing suicide by bearing steel in Vaes Dothrak, of course. And then the top artwork is by April's 420. So that's probably a slightly, it's like the goods. There is one little like bit of fondness that Dany has for her brother. Even though her brother's abusive, she is also able to see the like, well, he was my only brother and he was family and that was all I had. And, you know, he tried to protect me and stuff like that. So this moment is perhaps idealized, but yeah, it's sort of, you can see Viserys is touching the dragon and Dany is not. And that sort of expressed what I was talking about, where like Dany's only connection to Targaryen stuff is through Viserys at the beginning. And of course, it is an abusive relationship. As I said, this artwork is by Head Ush. And this is basically right out of the first chapter with Dany wearing the dress and she's afraid. And Viserys is getting ready to sell her to Drogo. So you remember he says, you know, I'd let every man in his Khalasar F you if that's what it took. I think that's in that chapter. And then finally, this is the same scene from the show. Same points. I'm just giving you a couple different pieces of artwork. Now, Dany is also the last dragon, and this means more to her. This is where things start to mean something. She has dragon dreams, right? First dragon dream, it's Viserys, and then there's the dragon, and she's terrified. And in the second dragon dream, Viserys is not there, and she's not terrified, and the dragon burns her, but she opens herself to it and feels scoured clean and transformed and strong and new. And the next day when she wakes up is this big turning point in her third chapter where she begins to master riding in the Dothraki ways. She takes control of the relationship with Drogo. This strength all comes from this dragon dream. So this is the beginning of Dany having association with dragons that is something positive. And we also see in her later dragon dream, right before she wakes the dragons, where it's like we see the kingly ghosts and there's this montage and you hear this, wake the dragon, wake the dragon. It begins as Viserys' abusive wake the dragon, but ends with this triumphant, like we're telling you how to wake the dragon, secret knowledge kind of vibes. So that mirrors the transformation of what waking the dragon and the dragon means to Dany in those first few chapters, where it transforms from this really dark, abusive thing into this source of inner strength. Inner strength and inner knowledge, because we see the dragon dreams are actually giving Dany knowledge about what to do, as well as strength. So there's this idea that there is an innate knowledge that's in Dany's blood, yes, but also like in the dragons, and it's awakened when that bond is created. Like Dany basically is using intuition to wake those dragons up. She didn't ask Mirri Maz Duur how to do it. She kind of just used intuition and she built up to it. Like she put him in the brazier a couple times. She's like, yeah, I kind of think I know how to do this. Like I just feel this need. It's kind of like my birds, right? When my birds get near a drawer, they get all crazy. They go into the drawer and their feathers flop up and they get defensive and like just nuts. Basically, it's their nesting instinct is being triggered. Like little Goosey thinks he wants to build a nest in my sunglasses drawer, and birds are very defensive about their nests. So you got to be careful when he's near a drawer. I use the stick to pick him up so I don't get bitten. But he doesn't know. He doesn't understand that like he wants to build a nest and that if he does, a female bird will come and that they'll have babies. He doesn't know all that. He just feels this, like he sees a little cubby hole and he's like, ooh, I could get in there and like tear things up. Why do I want to tear things up? Well, to make a nest. So Dany's she doesn't know exactly what she's doing, but these instincts are leading her to this revelation where she hatches the dragons. And of course, like I said, we see in this dream that there's this idea of cleansing fire and rebirth and transformation. And so there's this ongoing question, like, what do the dragons mean? What does fire and blood mean? The dragons are monsters, in a sense, and they're very destructive. But of course, you know, when you look at the mythical influences for dragons, in Eastern mythology, dragons are usually associated with knowledge, transformation, higher awareness, and, you know, positive concepts like that. And it usually does revolve around the idea of cleansing fire. Sometimes you get the Kundalini serpent stuff in there, but let's just stick with cleansing fire. Fire is destructive, but it also can burn away the corruption. And Dany's role in the story, cleansing fire, is kind of like a big part of it, right? She's the one who's been given the dragons, and she has very clear objectives on how she uses them, and a lot of it seems to be burning away, you know, the evil and the rot. So that starts with her. Before the dragons are even born, she herself is seared and transformed. And then that's echoed when she actually hatches the dragons and walks into the pyre and survives the fire and is reborn on the Dothraki Sea in fire and comes out as the mother of dragons and the last dragon. So Dany is the last dragon. That's what it means. And she even transfers that status from Rhaegar to herself in one of those dreams as well. She sees Rhaegar, opens his visor, and it's her face inside. It's like, you're the last dragon. It's not, because she's told it was Rhaegar. And now it's, oh no, it's actually you. So this art is by Ted Nasmith. And here we go. So this is A. Mhysa, the artist. A. Mhysa. So moving right along, Dany is, of course, a former slave. She wasn't made to make bricks or anything like some of the Myronese slaves, but she was sold into slavery. And she literally says that before she makes her move with the Unsullied in Astapor. She talks to Jorah, and she says, "Do you know what it's like to be sold, Sir Jorah? I do." And it's like, yeah, if you've been sold for money, you're a slave. And she's, you could say she's a marital slave or a slave bride, a child slave bride, however you want to break it down. At 13, Illyrio and Viserys sold her to the Dothraki, who are a foreign people. And that's, you can draw a comparison, certainly, to all the women in Westeros in medieval society with arranged marriages. But there is a couple important differences that I want to draw. Someone like Catelyn Tully, who's married to Ned Stark. First, she was promised to Ned's older brother, Brandon. And when he died, it was like, well, marry his younger brother. Very clearly, this is a political marriage. The Starks and the Tullys are building an alliance. That's why Ned and Catelyn got married. It's not romantic. It's arranged. Now, it's not exactly a selling, if you will, because Catelyn is going along with it. She understands this is my duty to my house to, fulfill this marriage. It's understood in medieval society, like Ned explains it to Sansa and Arya. One day you'll grow up and marry a lord and run your own castle. Okay. Now, the thing is, when a woman like Catelyn is married off, if you will, to someone like Ned, it can go different ways. And Catelyn and Ned both reflect on, they're kind of lucky. They found love. The love grew between them. Ned obviously is a good man and treated Catelyn well, right? It can also go the way of Ramsay Snow and Jane Poole on the extreme end of things. But this is the point I want to make. There are certain protections for women that are married off in the context of a feudal society, because the whole point is to build an alliance. And so if the man abuses his new wife, that jeopardizes said alliance. And we see that at play in Winterfell. People hear Ramsay abusing Jane Poole, who is supposed to be Arya Stark, of course, and this is undermining the Northerners' support for Ramsay and Roose Bolton. And ultimately, it will lead to certain Northern houses turning against them. So there are protections. You can't just go abusing the woman that is, sent to you from another house if you're the young lord or prince or whatever. I mean, you can, but there will be consequences. So those are political protections. Dany has none of those. When Dany is sold off, Drogo can do with her as he likes. He could kill her, give her to his men. He could do anything. And Dany reflects on that as well. And she says, it's only because Drogo was kind, I'm lucky. And of course, it began as pretty clearly marital rape. It was not kind at first. The first night is a little bit kind between Drogo and Dany, but it is marital rape. We're meant to understand, she is sold into a situation where she is at Drogo's mercy, and it gets better and worse. And after this turning point with the dragon dream, yeah, exactly. She would cry. She's in pain. It is what it is. And she's 13 or 14. I think she turns 14 right when she's married. And yeah, she cries herself to sleep. So let's not erase that. Now, the relationship does evolve. There's a little bit of Stockholm Syndrome. There's a little bit of Dany earning, there's a lot of Dany earning Drogo's respect by mastering the Dothraki ways and by rising to the challenge. Even in the bedroom, she's like, let's do some different positions other than doggy style, where we can see each other. And like, so she's using reason and various things. And then, of course, we see in the Khalasar, she protects, we're going to talk about this, but she protects the Lazarene prisoners of war. So as she increases her personal power, she gains Drogo's respect, and this helps turn the situation around. But we should never lose sight of the fact that Dany is a survivor of both slavery and sexual abuse. The marital rape situation with Drogo, as well as Viserys abused her sexually as well. So these are things that she has survived and dealt with, and this informs her person and the way that she treats other people and has empathy for other people. So it's very important to understand that she is a former slave and a freed slave, essentially, when she escapes the Dothraki. I also want to point out that when A Dance with Dragons ends, and I just reread Dany's last chapter last night, and this one is Felix Sotomayor art. So the last scene, Dany has just been eating the raw, not quite raw, but the lightly cooked horse meat with Drogon, right? They're eating the horse that they just killed, and Dany's like, oh, his Dar wouldn't like this, but Daria would think it was cool. And then she hears Cal Jaco, I think, his Khalasar, roll up to the scene, and she stands beside her dragon and prepares to meet them. And we know that she's now going to have some confrontation with the Dothraki that's going to lead to the Mother of Mountains and the Stallion Who Mounts the World, which we'll get to. But the point is, when the story ends, the Dothraki still think they own Dany. And they're literally trying to drag her ass back to Vaes Dothrak so she can be a good crone if they don't kill her or rape her. And this is her monologue. Like, they might kill me or rape me, and at the very least, they're going to try to take me back to Vaes Dothrak. She has a dragon, fortunately. But they still own her in their mind, is the point. So even though she's an escaped slave, she's not according to the Dothraki. So, yeah, we shouldn't forget. We can't lose sight of it because George is reminding us, again, at the very end of A Dance with Dragons, like, no, people still think they own her. So, yeah, it's quite a thing. And I love this art, too. And again, we're going to get into all my theories about what's going to happen past that scene. But we're just building the character. So she's an abolitionist revolutionary, like I said. It starts with the Lazarene, her idea of using her power to protect the weak. She sees Aroa being raped by the Dothraki after they've raided the Lazarene, and they're like, oh, spoils of war, this and that. And she's like, nah, Jorah, I claim her. She understands the only way she can protect these victims is to claim them as her own personal slaves, right? You guys remember, she uses her political power to protect the victims of war. She collects a bunch of them. The TV show is super accurate here, just like it is in the books. And she basically goes to Drogo and she challenges the Dothraki traditions, which are that all the blood riders and riders can claim whoever they want when they defeat somebody. They can rape and pillage and all that. Dany challenges that tradition. And she says, no, I claim them. And she says, if the riders want to mount them, let them claim them as wives and treat them well. And of course, one of the other blood riders gets upset and fights Drogo, and Drogo kills him over it and backs Dany. So Dany's using her first little bit of political power to protect people and to be she's a revolutionary because she's changing the customs. She's upending tradition and creating more justice in the world. That's a very important quality. And of course, it doesn't work out. Later, after Drogo dies, they claim Aroa, and she gets raped again and possibly killed or something, So it doesn't, and we see that through Dany's arc. She's constantly trying to do the right thing and make the world better. It doesn't always work. And that's true for all the characters. Brienne, Jon Snow, every character that tries to make the world better runs up against a lot of resistance. That's because George, he's optimistic, but he's not he doesn't have rose-colored glasses. He's realistic. He's showing you, in fact, I'm going to share this quote, where George talks about my heroes are the dreamers, the ones who are trying to leave the world a better place than when they found it. And even if it doesn't always turn out perfect, it's the fighting the good fight that I admire. That's what makes them heroic. So two separate questions of somebody trying to change the world, make it better, and then like, how does it go? Like how it goes in Meereen is complicated, and we can debate all the different little things about it. Jon tries to bring the wildlings, onto the southern side of the wall and reconcile them with men, and that's the right move, but he doesn't do it very well as far as handling the politics. He sends his friends away from Castle Black, is very poor rollout, if you will, in the Shield Hall, and he's kind of motivated by his desire to save Arya, so he doesn't execute it very well, but he's doing the right thing by trying to reconcile the wildlings. So that's how Martin writes, and we shouldn't get confused that just because Dany's attempts to do justice don't always work out perfectly doesn't change the fact that she is a revolutionary who is trying to change the world and make it a better place. So Dany has this important quote where she says, "Why do the gods make kings and queens if not to protect those who can't protect themselves?" It's a very important thing. And it's one of the things she says to Jorah right before she pulls the move at Astapor to free the Unsullied. So she's like, look, if I'm going to try to be queen of Westeros or queen of anywhere, I have to use my power to protect the weak. That's what the purpose is of having power. So I love this because the use of power it's either reconciliation or the use of power that are like it's the main theme of Ice and Fire. And it's probably not important to pick. These are both main themes. The use of power is a constant commentary in every chapter. All the magic power, the political power, the fire of the gods. George is just asking the question of how people use it and showing a million permutations of that. Dany's been given these dragons. It is an incredible power. But the thing is that even before she has the dragons, she's showing us how she uses her power, again, by protecting the Lazarene. So once she gets dragons, what does she do with them? She protects the weak. Jorah says, let's go to Slaver's Bay and buy an army, but doesn't explain what the Unsullied really are about. Then she gets there and finds out about the strangled puppies and the murdered babies and everything else that goes into it. And what does she do? She decides to become a revolutionary on the spot. And instead of buying as many Unsullied as she can, she tries to end the practice. She tries to start a revolution, which she does. Now, what takes hold after, again, is more complex. But she definitely upended the power order. No more Unsullied are being made by those people in that place. And of course, she also claimed the boys in training who weren't soldiers yet for that same purpose. So, root and stem, forgive me, Unsullied, for the castration humor, but the point is that she's trying to eradicate the practice, root and stem. She's leaving nothing behind. She kills the Unsullied, she claims all the kids in training, and then sweeps through the rest of Slaver's Bay and does more of the same. Yes. Root and stem, ending the practice. That's the important thing. Not just claiming the Unsullied that can help her, not just killing the masters so that she can steal an army. We're in her monologue, and this is one of the things I get my back up, like the Dany haters, the friggin' deranged Dany haters out there love to turn this around and say, oh, she just did this because she's selfish. She needed an army. I don't know if those people just didn't read the books, because we're in Dany's head. We can hear her thoughts. We hear what she says about no more strangled puppies and no more dead babies. And we see her actions. It's very clearly done from a moral perspective. So that's all I have to say about that. It's a silly criticism. So then I already talked about George's quotes about heroism, but there's another important quote about what fire and blood really means. And this is, if you guys haven't heard this is going to blow your minds. So this is from Fever Dream, and this is a book by George Martin written before Song of Ice and Fire. I haven't read it. It's something, it's like a steampunk vampire type thing, but it involves slavery. And somebody pointed this quote out to me on Twitter a couple years ago. It's a little bit of colloquial speech here, but I'll just try to read this paragraph. You know, I never held much with slavery, even if I never done much against it neither. I would have, But those damned abolitionists were such Bible thumpers. Only I've been thinking, and it seems to me maybe they was right after all. You can't just go using another kind of people like they weren't people at all. Know what I mean? It's got to end sooner or later. Better if it ends peaceful, but it's got to end, even if it has to be with fire and blood, you see? Maybe that's what them abolitionists been saying all along. You try to be reasonable, that's only right. But if it don't work, you got to be ready. Some things is just wrong. They got to be ended. So, what does fire and blood mean? Before House Targaryen ever existed, and before Daenerys ever existed, fire and blood, yes, it's John Brown. That's what it is. It's referring to the concept that sometimes violence is justified and necessary to end evil. And that's a point of view. You can disagree with that if you're, to take the totally pacifist philosophy. And I think that's an interesting discussion. But be it as it may, fire and blood represents that view, that idea that sometimes you got to defend yourself and sometimes you got to go to war to protect people. If there is a justified use of violence, that would be the only time, right? Self-defense, like Mr. Miyagi, karate for defense only, or to protect the weak. Particularly in the case of things like slavery. That's worth fighting for, I think. So it's interesting. Fire and blood sounds like violence. And it's frequently, we hear that phrase, fire and sword, used by everybody. And the Valyrians were very violent. So fire and blood has certain connotations just intuitively. But when you read this quote, and then you think about Dany's plot, you can see a completely different side of this, right? Fire and blood started as an abolitionist phraseology for George Martin. I'm sure he picked it up somewhere or adapted it from something. But he's adopted it or come up with it as his abolitionist phraseology, fire and blood. Sometimes it's got to end with fire and blood because some things are just wrong. Then he creates Daenerys Targaryen. Okay. And remember, all of House Targaryen exists as Dany's backstory. When George starts writing Game of Thrones, it's just Dany and the Starks. There's no other Targaryens. It starts with Dany. Who is Dany? Well, she's a lost scion of a great house. Who's that house? Well, they're dragon people. Originally, they were going to be lizard people and not dragon lords at all. And that's why there's that note inside Game of Thrones that says, so-and-so convinced me to put the dragons in. Originally, the Targaryens were going to be dragon people. But the point is, this is all backstory invented for Dany's character. It's become a whole thing, but that's how it started. And Dany's character is that of an abolitionist and a revolutionary. So it's not an accident that the house words of House Targaryen are fire and blood. The origin of that idea is abolitionism. And so you could really say that Dany's story is written around the idea of her being a revolutionary and an abolitionist. It's the most important facet of her character. It's the operative role that she has in the story. And you can see how thematically crucial it is. And even better, like I said, all of her magical stuff is very much parallel. If Jorah redeems himself, which Valyrian sword would Dany end up giving him? Oh, no, it'll be Longclaw. Dany's going to have Dawn that she got from Darkstar. She's going to give that to Jon. Jon's going to give Longclaw to Jorah. It's going to be a little three-way trade. Yeah, he's going to get Longclaw back. I think because Jon's either going to wield Dawn or one of the swords that used to be ice. Those are the swords that belong in his hand, more than Longclaw. So fire and blood. And then the other quote, like I said, the heroes are the ones who try to make the world better, even if the results are imperfect. So that lets you know Dany is a hero of the story, and the heroic ideal of the story is just that, trying to make the world better. Actively, it's empathy. That comes from empathy. I mean, caring about other people and not just yourself. George is a hippie, so there you go. Dany is the Mhysa, the mother. Okay, when she starts off her story, she thinks about the Red Door a lot. The Red Door represents a house where she was happy. The only memory she has of being happy, content for a little while in the house, I think it was Raymond Derry's, it was with Sir Raymond Derry in the house in Bravos. The point is what it represents. The Red Door represents home and safety and security. And Dany as basically an orphan and someone who's on the run, is always longing for home and safety, and she doesn't have it. And so what happens is she kind of gives up on the idea of finding the house with the red door, and instead what she's doing is creating home and safety for all of her people. And in that way, she is fulfilling her need for home and safety. And this photo is John Picasso? Yes. Oh, this one was Spark Out 1911. And this one was Magali Villeneuve. Magali Villeneuve. Yes, I've been saying that name really bad. I heard someone say it in French, so it's Magali Villeneuve. Spark Out 1911 and John Picasso. I love this one because it really captures the kindness of Dany's character. You know, like you almost feel like you're on the ground and you need a hand up, and there she is giving you her hand. And that's how she comes across to thousands of people in the story. Of course, it's unfortunate that on the TV show, because of where they filmed that scene, all of the extras that were cast were darker skinned people. And so we got that visual of the one white person being held up by a sea of brown people, which smacks of white saviorism and other modern TV trope issues that really don't have anything to do with Dany's story. So, you know, George has clarified. He's like, hey, that's just how TV is. You cast extras. We were filming in Morocco, so the extras are Moroccan. And, you know, Slaver's Bay in general meant to have a sort of Middle Eastern vibe. But the thing about Slaver's Bay is that they're collecting slaves from everywhere, all over Essos and the islands and far-flung reaches of the world. So the slaves in Slaver's Bay, probably more of them might be, you know, Marinese or Giscari descent, but a lot of them are not. A lot of them would be ancient Sarnori and just people from all over the world. So it is supposed to be a multi-ethnic thing. And the idea is like, when you're a slave, you're stripped of your humanity and your identity and all that stuff. And so all these slaves have a shared experience, and one that Dany shares. The way that it's supposed to be is, again, like it's more like Spartacus, a former slave who escaped slavery and then comes back. See, okay, let me explain this. The Dothraki take people prisoner, and then they sell them as slaves in Slaver's Bay. And then in Slaver's Bay, they train them to be slaves and then sell them to rich people in Volantis or other Slaver's Bay cities or wherever. That's how it works. So when Dany is bought by the Dothraki, sold to Khal Drogo, she is being vacuumed up by a giant slave network, slave commerce network. And we'll talk about this more, but the Volantene merchant talks about this to Tyrion. Oh, Dany smashed the slave trade. She's disrupted the commerce for all these places by doing that. So she gets pulled into this slave trade wheel, if you will, when she is sold to Drogo, works her way back to the hub of that slave economy in Slaver's Bay, and then helps the other slaves free themselves. So that is a very powerful story. So she's building a red door for everyone because she didn't have one for herself. She escaped slavery, and then her heart goes out to all these other people, and she helps them escape slavery. Don't need to belabor the point. You can see how her experience informs her actions. And this mother quality is really important because it's not just, she's taking care of people. And that's why spontaneously all these people begin to call her mother in these various tongues. Like, she almost has a godlike status because their lives have been misery until the Dragon Lady came through and used her dragons to help the Unsullied. And then what did she do? She told the Unsullied, there they are. There are the masters. Slay the masters. She didn't do it for them. She just got it started. She set it off. She was the fire starter. And then she put the power in their hands. You think those Unsullied didn't find a little joy in being like, oh, kill these motherfuckers? The ones that have been whipping me and cutting my balls off and stuff? Yeah, I'll stab that guy. No problem. Where's another one? Sure, I'll stab him too. I mean, yeah, they've had their humanity, mostly burned out of them, but they're still human. And we see that with Grey Worm. He cares about his brothers and sisters and stuff like that. Brienne's fat sister is making a point about Dany that she has very simple taste. She's not a fancy spoiled queen. Of course, she didn't grow up in luxury. Some small details. She likes simple foods like figs, dates, a little honey roasted goat. She likes simple clothes, sand silk trousers, and a painted vest. She doesn't like the tow cars. She likes the simple bench, not the dragon throne. Yeah, she wants to live in a house with a red door, not a palace. And the whole idea of retaking Westeros is really Viserys' dream. What's happened is that Viserys' dream of home and belonging has gotten blended with this idea of retaking Westeros. And this is really important to separate because it's like, we can all see this big test is coming for Dany. When she thinks she wants to conquer Westeros with her dragons, but needs to realize that she really needs to go and protect Westeros with her dragons from the White Walkers. And I think we all expect her to navigate that choice, at least I certainly do. And part of the reason why is because what she really wants is not, a big palace and personal power, but she longs to protect people. She longs to give people a home and safety. Like, that's what makes her feel fulfilled. That's what she does with her time on the earth. So, yeah. Last thing about the Mhysa and the mother stuff is it also ties into Dany's goddess inspirations. And I've talked about this in a video called The Vedic Indian Origins of Dany and Drogon, where I mostly talked about the Indian goddesses, Sati and Parvati and Kali, that Dany is inspired by. And also Danu. Danu. That's actually where her name comes from. I'll just do a couple. I really encourage you to watch that video. That's one of the videos I'm the most proud of. So, okay, let's start with Kali. So, Kali is, if you've ever seen a picture of Kali, she's very fearsome and terrifying, right? She's got the skull necklace and bloody weapons, and her tongue is out, dripping blood, and she's very haggard looking. So it's a very terrifying image. And I've got a video on my other channel, Mythic Concepts, explaining all about Kali, but she represents a few things. She represents the progress of time, which is really about the cycles of creation and destruction that everything comes from and returns to. And so she is called the Black One because she represents the void. And the idea is that time and reality emerge from the void. And so Kali is the progression of time, as in like the inception of all reality. So she is a mother figure giving birth to everything, but also devouring everything at the end. The void, the womb tomb. The womb tomb concept is Kali. And George uses it a lot in the books. Kali also represents the wild, destructive energy of, Mother Nature or the universe that sometimes is, the wrath of the gods that can be aroused. Kali has a wrathful side as well, and we see that with Dany. Dany, in case you haven't put this together, is called the Khaleesi. Khaleesi. It's right there. And importantly, Kali is associated with the Sea of Chaos. So we've got this Dothraki Sea and the Khaleesi ruling over the Dothraki Sea. It's layers of symbolism. It's lots of fun. So check out the Vedic Indian Origins of Dany and Drogon. Sorry, getting tongue-tied. It's pretty fun stuff. But it ties into the idea that Dany is both a mother figure and a protector, and also a cleansing fire. And so the point I really want to make is that sometimes people think there is a conflict between Dany's Mhysa personality and her dragon personality. The Mhysa protects and loves and wants to plant trees, but dragons don't plant trees. Dragons burn and destroy. How's she going to deal with that? Well, is there anything more angry than or dangerous than a mother protecting her cubs, right? The reason why she's associated, one of the reasons why she's associated with mother goddesses like Kali, who can be wrathful and destructive, is to explain that that is part of Dany's personality. She does crucify 163 slave masters. You know why? Because they crucified 163 slave children. She could have just executed them. She crucified them. That was wrathful. It was over the top. It was, in a legal sense, it was not good. It's more just to have, clean executions than sort of an eye for an eye type of a thing. So that is a case where this is a barbaric world, and Dany's dipping into that barbarism a little bit. Still, I'm not really shedding any tears for any crucified slave lords, and I hope none of y'all are either. But, that's the sort of wrathful, destructive side. Like, she has that dragon temper. The important thing is that it seems to so far only be aroused by injustice, and you should be angry about injustice. So it's kind of like the Rage Against the Machine, anger is a gift concept. It's like, well, if you're getting angry about something that's wrong, that's good. You should be angry about people suffering and injustice, and that anger, that outrage moves you to action. So that's definitely part of Dany's personality. And a lot of that goes back to Cully and stuff like that. She has also got a lot of Venus and Aphrodite symbolism. She's called the most beautiful woman in the world. She's a very sexual person, Dany. She experiments. She's bisexual. George wrote that Dario had her every way a man can have a woman. So yeah, she is very much personifying that erotic love goddess. But of course, that's more so the pop culture understanding of Aphrodite and Venus. They have many other sides to their figures as well, including a warlike aspect. So she's representing a lot of the sides of Aphrodite and Venus, especially when she's at the top of the pyramid, which is very Mount Olympus-like. And she's reflecting on the nature of what it's like to be up there and what gods feel like and stuff like that. The point, of course, is that all the Lightbringer, Sword of the Morning, Lucifer, Morning Star crap comes from the planet Venus. So Aphrodite is just the Roman version of Venus. So giving Dany Venus and Aphrodite associations is just tying her back into Lightbringer and the Sword of the Morning and all of those concepts. So this is the female manifestation of the Lightbringer symbolism, would be Venus and Aphrodite stuff. Venus is in love with Adonis, who got resurrected. Yeah, more Daenerys there. That's actually really good. I was going to look into that, Micah Faines. When I was reflecting on this last night, I was like, I don't know if I ever really followed that thread all the way out. Because isn't she involved with Ares as well, like the god of war? That would be Aphrodite. The other goddess is Danu. Danu is really the important thing in Indian mythology is that Danu, she's a river goddess, so there's some cool like green sea, Nissa stuff. But she's the mother of Varitra. And Varitra is a three-headed dragon. So again, Danu, an Indian mother and river goddess, is the mother of a three-headed dragon, Varitra. Dany is the mother of dragons from House Targaryen, who has a three-headed dragon sigil. So a whole lot of House Targaryen comes from Indian mythology as well as Iranian or what you call Zoroastrian mythology. That's where most of it comes from, in fact, which is really cool. There are also some dragons in Norse myth, but I don't see that influence as much on the Targaryen side of things. We still see that mostly like Bloodraven has like Nidhogg connections, because he's in the north. So you have that Norse dragon side. There might be some Fafnir stuff with Tyrion. So Danu is also a Celtic mother goddess. Thank you for mentioning that. There is some debate about whether there is connection there. I think it's indisputable that there is a loose connection because Vedic Indian mythology comes from Proto-Indo-European mythology, which is also where the Celtic mythology comes from. However, it's thousands of years between that common ancestor myth and then the Indian Danu and the Celtic Danu. So to call them the same is not really, they are related. There are common origins, yes. And I have seen George use some of the Celtic Danu ideas as well. And Danu's symbol, the Celtic Danu, her symbol is that triple spiral that is the sigil of House Massey. And that is why there are so many rivers in Europe that are, the Danube, and there's a bunch of others. Yeah, because it's that river goddess name made it all. So she's a river goddess everywhere. I guess that part is the same. So yeah, the goddess influences on Dany's character are very interesting. Complements the idea of that she's seen as this Mhysa figure. Like spontaneously by these people, when she frees the slaves, they look at her and say, "Mother." So it's, George is creating his own mother goddess archetype, and it mostly revolves around Daenerys. So she really is a goddess figure and a mythical figure in the story. Probably as much or more than anybody else, which is super cool. Danu in Rigvedic Sanskrit means fluid, dewdrop, born from dew, born from dewdrops. And in Avestan, the same word means river. And Avestan is ancient Iranian, essentially. So, yeah. And I already mentioned the Iron Throne trap. That's where all this is going. You know, the idea that she's got to choose between, if she wants to be queen of Westeros, should she try to conquer and claim the throne, or should she try to protect the nation from the White Walkers? And we'll talk about the Stannis foreshadowing as well. So let's move on. This is Donato Giancola, and I guess I could have moved this earlier. This is also the same slide. This is more Mhysa talk. So this is Dany with the Dothraki and the dragons. It's kind of a portrait. I'm not sure if this is a particular scene, more of a conceptual thing. But yeah, Donato Giancola. Dany, and also Jon, once he finds out, are the heirs to a Valyrian legacy. And it is not fun. It is, the Valyrians were cruel. They were slave masters who depopulated Essos with genocide, and they just fed people to their minds for thousands of years. Then we have the magical experiments on Gogossos and things, but it's mostly just they were a slave empire. They used their dragons to enslave half the world, a quarter of it. So they learned that from the Giscari. They defeated the Giscari in ancient wars 5,000 years ago, but the Giscari were the original slavers. And of course, Old Gis, the ancient city of Gis, is in Slaver's Bay, just a little bit to the south of Astapor. It's in ruins now, and there's a city called New Gis on an island. But basically, Slaver's Bay is the heirs to the Giscari culture. So there's a contiguous culture there. It goes all the way back to Old Gis. That is where slavery was first created or whatever. That is where the Valyrians learned it. So Dany, it's very important that Dany is a Valyrian using dragons to free slaves and end slavery as a practice at the place which is the cradle of Valyrian slavery. So this is a poetic echo. 5,000 years later, this is cradle to grave slavery, basically. Like the cradle of slavery is here in Slaver's Bay, and Dany is trying to put it in its grave. She's got to do some work in Volantis as well. But yeah, it's a very important thing to notice. Dragons to liberate instead of dragons to enslave. And this is a layer of atonement. It's not Dany's fault, but she is atoning. She has the dragon. The reason why she has dragons is because ancient Valyrians did messed up blood magic and created the dragon bond and existed for 5,000 years and created the Targaryen family that conquered Dragonstone and then Westeros. She's benefiting from all that. That's why she has the dragons. So it is right and fitting that she takes those dragons and goes back to clean up some of the mess that her ancestors created. That's sick. That's atonement. That is an important theme of the story. The Great Empire of the Dawn, we do not know if they practiced slavery or not. We just don't know. It's interesting to speculate, but I'm not going to get into that right now because, yeah, there's not an easy answer. I would say probably not. It seems like it's mostly, the Dawn, the Atlantis. It's supposed to be a great place that gradually got corrupted and then fell. So maybe towards the end. It says the Bloodstone Emperor enslaved his people. So maybe that was the beginning of it. We've kind of made that point already. So again, this is the legacy. Oh, I'm sorry. That last art is by Sam Hogg. This is one of my favorite artworks here. Obviously, you can see what's going on. See the Unsullied. And the Unsullied correctly here, I'll note, are drawn in all different skin tones. And that is how we should picture them. So that's the point. They are slaves from everywhere who are now united into a new people. And this one is by Mark Simonetti. And these are the slaves of Old Gis. So these are the Valyrians enslaving the Giscari 5,000 years ago after destroying the Empire of Gis. So in the back, you can see the burning landscape of the city of Gis, which they sowed with salt and bones. All right, so we have come to the end of the first section. This is Dany's character-based plot arc. This is who she is in the story. This is her trajectory. These are the experiences that inform her. This is her compass. You guys get it. Now we're going to pivot to who she is in a more magical sense. It means it's Azor Ahai time. Prophecy, princess that was promised, all that stuff. So thanks for bearing with me through the character stuff. Now we're getting into the magic. It's the fun things, the theories. I did think it was important though, so blah, blah, blah. So Azor Ahai Reborn, that's obviously Dany. In book 2, we get the description of Azor Ahai Reborn, the whole prophecy from Mel, waking dragons from stone, bleeding stars. When the cold breath of darkness falls on the world, the hero will be born to bring the spring again. It's all, you guys know the drill. But mainly waking the dragons from stone and the bleeding star. Well, it's like, oh, wait a minute. We saw that already at the end of book 1. So it's cool. George gives us the fulfillment of the prophecy at the end of book 1. And then at the beginning of the book 2, he tells us the prophecy that Dany just carried out. So that's cool, right? And yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious. The eggs are called stone, so she's waking dragons from stone. The red comet's in the sky. The long night is not here yet, but we can say that it is coming. So it's nice of the comet to birth the dragons and give them a few years to grow up, right? Before the actual long night comes. Can't fight the others with baby dragons. So yeah, I think we can all say that the long night is coming. Also, I believe the comet will come back to help, nudge on the new long night. Hashtag moon meteors. That's all pretty easy. She's definitely Azor Ahai Reborn. I think it's Jon too, but it's definitely Dany. We can't argue that. It's very obviously Dany. So Bonero is on board. And I've got a Bonero slide that's coming later. I'll sneak it in now just so you can see Atlantis Morissette's Bonero. He is the high priest of R'hllor in Volantis, and he has put out the word that Dany is Azor Ahai Reborn, and that she is here to lead the forces of light and all that stuff. So we'll talk about that. But point is, Bonero says, yeah, she woke dragons from stone. That's her. That's Azor Ahai Reborn. So let's get ready to help her. And of course, the dragons are her Lightbringer. She doesn't have a flaming sword like Azor Ahai does, but she has the dragons. And it is Zarzo and Daxos who looks at the dragons and said, when they were small, they were a wonder, but grown, they're a flaming sword above the world. And George is referencing the sword of Damocles, which is like, an executioner's sword that's sort of ready to fall, right? Something like that. But of course, a flaming sword over the world is a comet. So you can see not only are the dragons compared to a flaming sword, but it's one that's flying over the world. And of course, the comet is the dragon's tail. Not going to get lost in the comet's, dragons, and flaming sword symbolism three-way. You guys know how that goes. So the dragons are Dany's Lightbringer, essentially. Jon will have a flaming sword. Eventually, he'll ride the dragon. And like I said, Dany will have her hands on some of these swords too. So Azor Ahai Reborn. Don't overthink it. It's definitely Dany. And she's also the prince that was promised. Princess that was promised, if you will. Because, as Maester Aemon says, no, we were all looking for a prince, But Valyrian words aren't gendered in the same way. And so it could be a prince or a princess. Dany has the dragons. That proves it. Now, the prince that was promised is kind of separate and kind of not. The prince that was promised is said to be an old prophecy from Valyria. So it is not a recent thing. It is an old prophecy from Valyria, which means it could be from Ahai and the Great Empire of the Dawn, but it's at least from Valyria. And the prince that was promised is associated with all the same things that Azor Ahai is. Ending the long night, fighting the war for the dawn, waking dragons. Maester Aemon and Mel both say the same thing. We see also there is this idea that the prince that was promised is Azor Ahai Reborn. Seems like Rhaegar thinks that, and so does the Ghost of High Heart. So we're going to talk about Aegon's prophecy in a minute, but they've all been looking for the prince that was promised. Basically from Valyria to Aegon to Rhaegar, all the way to Maester Aemon. They are all thinking that this is the same thing. And of course, it's going to turn out to be two people at least, Jon and Dany. Maybe it includes others. We'll get to the three heads of the dragon question, but certainly Jon and Dany are both the prince that was promised. They are both of the line of Aerys and Rhaella, of course. And they both will be fighting the war for the Dawn with dragons. So again, don't overthink it. This artwork is by Kirsty Carter. And I said it earlier, but this is Zarori. This is also the cover art I used for the video Born to Burn the Others, which we're going to talk about later. We will talk about the idea that Dany could become a Night's Queen as well. That's at the very end. And we're going to talk about Ahai and Quaid as well, too. We're getting there. Okay. Visions of Rhaegar. Wait a minute. Is that Rhaegar? Oh, that's reading Rhaegar. That's reading Rhaegar. Sorry. I'll give you the real Rhaegar. There he is. Oh, no, that's reading Rhaegar, too. He looks pissed. There's Rhaegar. Okay, there he is. Sorry. I don't know what happened. I thought I had this all ironed out, this presentation. I don't know how this got in there. So anyway, yeah, Dany sees a vision of Rhaegar, and it's with Elia, and they've got 2 children. One is baby Aegon, and one is Rhaenys, who's a little older. Rhaegar does have sick purple glasses. You're totally right. He does. I think he got those from my drawer, / Goose's nesting box. Couple of important things happen in this vision. All kinds of phraseology is dropped. I mean, it's kind of stunning, really. Dany looks at him, and Rhaegar is playing the harp, and Ellie is holding baby Aegon. Rhaegar just spits out. He's like, there must be one more. 3 heads has the dragon. And, or first, she says, will you make a song for him? Meaning baby Aegon. And he says he has a song. His is the song of ice and fire, and he's the prince that was promised. And then he turns and looks at kind of in Dany's direction, and Dany thinks he's looking at her, and he's like, there must be one more. 3 heads has the dragon. And Dany's unsure whether or not he can actually see her, kind of like Bran looking at Ned in the Godswood. So obviously the reader is going, okay, Rhaegar's dead, and this baby is dead too. Obviously Fagon is pretending to be this baby, Rhaegar and Elia's baby Aegon, but he's not. He's definitely fake, and we'll talk about that. So this baby is dead. This was not the prince that was promised. And the thing is that Rhaegar, like everyone else trying to interpret prophecy, just like us, he's imperfect. He's trying his best, and this is why I sympathize with the character so strongly. He realizes that he has the whole fate of the world on his shoulders, and this Aegon's prophecy crap is pretty heavy. And he sees the signs, along with Maester Aemon, a little communication from Bloodraven even, and they are, hashing this thing out. Like Maester Aemon says, Rhaegar, he saw a comet the night that Aegon was conceived, and he thought the Bleeding Star had to be a comet, which he's right. So Rhaegar, it's like, yeah, he figured that out. The Bleeding Star is a comet. Rhaegar's good at symbolism. That's why he hangs out at my house and reads fucking all my woo-woo dark books, So we're into it. Joseph Campbell, he's into it. So, yeah, it had to be a bleeding star. And that also means that comet sex is canon. Rhaegar knows when they conceived baby Aegon, and they had comet sex. They looked up and saw the comet, and they said, you know what? Tonight's the night, baby. We're going to make a prince that was promised. Then he told his uncle or great-uncle Aemon, he's like, you know what? We banged under the comet. I think we made the prince that was promised. That's all canon. Just want you to know. Don't tell me to chill, baby. I'm not chill at all. We've got a long stream to get through here. I need this stuff to get the blood flowing. So comet was seen when Aegon was conceived, toying with Rhaegar's emotions. Not that comet. Sorry, buddy. But the point is that we've got this idea out there that there has to be 3 people. 3 dragon riders, presumably. That's what Jorah thinks it means. He says that to Dany. He's like, yeah, 3 people, 3 heads as a dragon. 3 dragons, 3 riders, just like the 3 conquerors. Makes sense. And the main thing is that we see all these phrases mentioned together. The prince that was promised, his is the song of ice and fire. But there are 3 heads to the dragon, so it's not just the prince that was promised. There should be 2 other people. So maybe 3 princes or princesses. It's unclear. So that's laid out in that vision. This is important stuff, right? So then we've got Aegon's prophecy. This art is by Nidhogg. It is one of my favorite arts. I put the glass candle in there. That's my glass candle that I created in Photoshop. Oh, yes. And I put it in there because this picture does look like Aegon is gazing at something. And I like the idea that they're all 3 hanging out at night just staring into the glass candle, messing with stuff. If you don't think Aegon, Rhaenys, and Visenya had a glass candle on Dragonstone, well, I got news for you. They did. They may not have brought dragon horns from Valyria, but they do have dragon swords, and those glass candles are a dime a dozen, man. It's obsidian everywhere in Valyria. So, I'd be very surprised if they didn't have a glass candle. And I also think that's part of the Dornish letter mystery, where Aegon flies back to Dragonstone after getting this disturbing message and then flies back to King's Landing. It's like, well, what did he do in Dragonstone to decide whether or not the message was true? Like, well, he went home, used his candle, and verified some information and came back. It was like, oh, okay, fine, we'll have a truce. Don't know what he saw, but I think he used a glass candle to get information. Yes, they can scry through it. Absolutely, they can. That's the whole point. You can watch in real time. It's a spy weapon. Yes, that's what Marwyn explains. Whether he used a candle or not, Aegon had the prophecy. So in House of the Dragon, there's the knife, and it's inscribed on the knife. We don't know if that's going to be the case in the books, but we do know Aegon also had a prophecy in the books, and that's why he conquered Westeros. The prophecy didn't necessarily tell him to conquer. The prophecy said, prince that was promised something, Song of Ice and Fire, something, something, long night, something. He intuited that it needed to be, that they needed to conquer, but they don't necessarily, I don't know if that was in the prophecy. TPTWTWP, the prince that was the whole point. The prince that was promised, it is the point. This is the point of the Targaryen dynasty. This is the Targaryen mission, to prepare for the long night, okay? This is why Dany and Jon exist. So the Targaryen mission that has occupied Aegon and Rhaegar and Egg and Maester Aemon and Bloodraven and everybody else is now Dany and Jon's mission. And they're just going to start to learn about it in the next book. But this is what they're going to learn, that they are responsible for fighting the long night with their dragons. Now, I had an interesting observation about the way that prophecy has kind of bitten the prick off of House Targaryen. And I'm referencing Gorgon of Geese, whom Marwyn the Mage quotes. It says, prophecy, it'll take your you-know-what in your mouth and make you moan with pleasure. And then the last, it'll bite down with its jaws and it'll bite your prick off. And prophecy will do it every time. But still, Dany does fulfill a prophecy. So it's the idea that, like, messing around with prophecy, it's tough. It's gonna, you try to interpret prophecy and act based on it. Like, he's probably thinking of Rhaegar when he's talking right there. Certainly we see that with Rhaegar. Adam Wooford says, so the glass candles are like the pink wizard glass. I don't know what that is. The pink wizard glass could see what was going on in the present. There were 13 of them from the Dark Tower. Oh, yeah. I don't know Dark Tower. But yes, they can see what's going on in the present. I bet they can do more than that. We're told that they can have instantaneous communication and sight, and they can also use them to enter people's dreams, the sorcerers. And we see Quaithe enter Dany's dreams with her candle, and then project herself to Dany in a sort of waking dream also. And Marwyn has been keeping an eye on Sam and everything at the wall to the point where he knows what's going on. He's like, well, tell me your whole story. I know most of it, but I might have missed a detail or two here on Candle Cam. So yes, they're very effective scrying things. And I wouldn't be surprised if the High Towers have one too. Yes, like a Palantir. It is rather like a Palantir. And just as the Palantirs turned out to be a window for Sauron to corrupt Saruman, there might be something going on with glass candles, but we'll get to that. So here's my observation about House Targaryen. Aegon decides that Aegon and his sisters, rather, in this excellent photo or artwork, they decide they need to conquer Westeros, right, in order to prepare for the long night. And the idea is to establish a powerful dynasty of dragon lords and to breed dragons that grow strong and just hold down the fort until the long night comes. And then we have a dragon army, lots of dragon riders. Makes sense. Didn't work out that way, though, did it? Despite all their best efforts, the last Targaryens who were trying to, act based on prophecy kind of screwed up. Aerys was probably having dreams and stuff, and he kind of went mad. And then Rhaegar was doing his best, but just kind of miscalculated, and then ended up losing the war and getting smashed by Robert. And then that led to Dany. And Dany was not born as the heir. She wasn't born in the Red Keep as the heir to a powerful Dragonlord monarchy. She led the life that we just outlined, on the run and orphaned with nothing, and sold into marital slavery and abused and all this stuff. Here's the thing, though. you could say, well, the prophecy, yeah, it pretty much did bite the prick off of Rhaegar and Aegon and Egg of Summerhall and King Aerys. Like, House Targaryen as a whole, the prophecy did a number on them. It cost them dearly, but it led to Dany, and it kind of needed to. Like, we needed Dany to be a freed slave and someone with an abolitionist revolutionary's values. And that doesn't come from being a princess in a castle. You know, I made a video comparing Rhaenyra to Daenerys, and that's the main difference. It's like one of them is born as a princess and one of them is not. And that just creates a very different upbringing. And even Fagon, he's had this curated upbringing. And yes, it's versatile, and he's taught to hunt and fish and do things with the common people, but he knows he's a prince. You know, he knows the common people are different than him. And Daenerys, she's grown up with nothing because of what the prophecy has done to House Targaryen. Now, I don't think the prophecy is a sentient thing that's like, oh, I've got to humble those Targaryens to produce the perfect savior. But from a narrative perspective, you can see how this worked. Because it almost seems kind of silly. You're like, well, why did George bother to have this Aegon's prophecy and Aegon conquer Westeros to get ready for the Long Night when their whole dynasty fell apart anyway before the Long Night? Well, it's like, it's an interesting story. They tried to prepare for it, but really to be prepared, we needed the right character. We need somebody with the right character. And that character can only come from somebody who grew up on the rough side of the tracks, which is Dany. So it's a very interesting way that the prophecy's cruel mercies led to the character of Daenerys, who is the ideal hero for the story. And Jon is similar. Jon doesn't even know he's a Targaryen. He thinks he's a bastard. He's sent to the Watch. He's then, turned on by Bowen Marsh and all, Janos Slynt and all the other ones. And then, of course, mutinied. So, like, he's, got a similar type of values. And he's got a little more privilege. And that's why we see that scene with Donald Noy, where he tells Jon, actually, you're a bully. You were trained to fight better than all these other recruits, and you're knocking the snot out of them because you have that privilege. So you need to check yourself, actually. And then Jon changes his behavior and starts to use that power to what? Protect Sam, right? That's the next thing he does, is he organizes the other kids to help him protect Sam. And they start working together as a team, which is just what you want as somebody training a fighting force. So, yeah, Jon and Dany have some similar values that come from their hard upbringings. Dany's is just more extreme. So that is Aegon's prophecy and its sort of path on the story. And I made this meme. So you can see that Aegon Targaryen and Rhaegar Targaryen, 250 years apart, are both using the same words and thinking about the same things. The prince that was promised and the Song of Ice and Fire. So this is basically the mission of House Targaryen, like I said. The Quaithe Agenda. It's time. The Quaithe Agenda. It's very mysterious. Quaithe is creepy. She wears a mask. It comes from a Shire. She's a Shadowbinder. She must want Dany to give in to fire and blood and kill people. Become a monster. Yes, give in to your hate, right? No, it's a terrible reading of the story. Quaithe might be one of the most misunderstood characters in the story, as a matter of fact. Here's why. It is, yeah, Alyssa Farman, shout out. It's pretty obvious what Quaithe wants Dany to do is to get ready to fight the others for the Long Night. How do we know this? A couple ways. First of all, the most obvious dream that Quaithe ever sent Dany is the one where Dany is burning the others on Dragonback. It's the Trident dream. It begins as she's dreaming about, oh, she's like Rhaegar at the Trident, but she's on a dragon instead of a horse. And the usurpers' armies were actually foes armored in ice. And she burned them with her dragon and they melted away and turned the Trident into a torrent. This is how it was meant to be. And then she wakes up and she's on board the ship at that time. She wakes up and Quaithe is in the room with her. And then she gives her whole to go north, you must go south thing, okay? You should trust Quaithe. Quaithe is very trustworthy. This is what I'm saying. She wants Dany to fight the others with her dragons. That is her agenda. That's the whole of it. And that's good. That's what we need Dany to do. The twist here is that this is Dany's good advisor. It just seems so creepy and freaky that it's hard to trust it. But yeah, Quaithe wants Dany to fight the others. So to go north, you must go south. To go west, you must go east. To go forward, you must go back. And to reach the light, you must pass beneath the shadow. And then Dany always says, she wants me to go to Ahai. So let's isolate the first parts of all those phrases. Where does Quaithe want Dany to go? North, west, forward, and to the light. What does that sound like to you guys? Going to Westeros, going north to fight the others, bringing the light and ending the long night, and going forward as in a dream of spring, a future for humanity. That's what Quaithe is trying to help Dany do. So this art, by the way, is Christina Carroll. Quaithe by Christina Carroll. Quaithe, Christina, Carroll. 3 cuss sounds, 3 different letters. Quaithe is Q, Christina is K, and Carroll is C. All right. English is fun. So, A Dance with Dragons for Dummies. What's that? I'm not calling anyone a dummy. I'm sorry. Yes, I am. So look, at the end of A Dance with Dragons, this is the most misinterpreted moment in the whole books. Dany is true to her nature. She is barefoot, bloody, delirious, sick, and starving. And what is she doing? She is walking back to Slaver's Bay by her damn self because Drogon won't fly there and because she thinks my people need me. And so she is, like I said, literally hoofing it back to Slaver's Bay, which is God knows how far away. She's just like, well, this river will get there eventually. So I'll just go and see what happens. She's not even a friggin' hunter. How's she going to feed herself? She's just like, my people need me. I've got to go. Okay. This is Dany showing you who she is. So then she starts having visions. She's getting sick. And Quaithe appears as a mask of starlight. First, Quaithe is talking to her as the blades of grass and as Jorah's face. It's all Quaithe. It's all Quaithe. Okay. And finally, she appears as a mask of starlight. That's the big clue, by the way. This is Church of Starry Wisdom stuff. She's literally a face of stars dispensing wisdom. It's like Starry Wisdom Church coming from the sky, like where God is. It couldn't be any more clear. Okay. Yeah. Shout out to the Lion King. So then Quaithe says, remember who you are, Daenerys. Dragons plant no trees. Remember the words of your house. And she says, fire and blood. And then she says, the dragons know. Do you? Remember who you are. The dragons know. Do you? And so people think this is foreshadowing this dark turn for Daenerys. And I guess you could say it. I mean, she's going to beat a path back to Westeros. She's going to burn Volantis. She's going to take control of the Dothraki. She's probably going to kill some cows. So, I mean, it's the end of her being sort of stalled out in Meereen and like trying to... Remember the whole quote where it's like, oh, you try to negotiate, you try to play nice, and if that doesn't work, sometimes you got to use fire and blood. Well, yes, we are coming to the time when she's going to use fire and blood. But again, does Quaithe want Dany to use fire and blood and remember who she is and not plant trees because Quaithe wants Dany to go back to Westeros and conquer the Iron Throne? Or is Quaithe saying, you got to stop dithering here in Slaver's Bay and get back to Westeros because the long night is coming. You've got to go west and north and push forward and make the light come. So you got to remember, you're a dragon, dude. I know you want to stay here and build a new kingdom and plant trees, but we need you in Westeros for the long night. That's what Quaithe is saying. Quaithe is not obsessed with the Iron Throne, guys. Like, it's the silliest thought in the world that Quaithe wants. People just don't think it through. They're just like, oh, that sounds violent. And the show made Dany go violent. So that means Dany's going to go violent. And it's like, well, we need to be more specific. Violent in, like, are we going to burn some more slave lords? Yes, we are. Are we going to burn thousands of innocent people in King's Landing on purpose because we're mad? No, we're not. That's not going to happen. We'll talk about wildfire and stuff in a minute, but yeah. So the main thing that Quaithe wants to tell Dany, other than go back to Westeros and go blah, blah, blah. To reach, you got to pass beneath the shadow. You got to come to Ahai. And Dany's like, well, why do you want me to go to Ahai? And she's like, well, truth waits for you there. So there is something in Ahai for Dany, some truth that she needs to know. Obviously, something to have to do with Lightbringer and the Long Night and the Azor Ahai and all that. So originally, I think George was going to have Dany go to Ahai. He's pretty much said that he was going to and changed his mind because it just would take too long. We don't need more travelogues on ships. But that's why glass candles. Glass candles, that's how Dany's going to learn the truth of Ahai. So this is Slavic Stark's Quaithe. This is the scene atop the pyramid where Dany's in the bath and she sees Quaithe in kind of a waking dream. This is the one where we really get an explanation of the candles and how it works. Like, Dany doesn't even seem asleep, and she's hearing and seeing Quaithe, and she's confused. She's like, are you here? And Quaithe is like, the glass candles are burning. And then she's like, I'll call to my servant. And they're like, they won't see me. That's what Quaithe says. They won't see me. They won't hear me. So Quaithe is a projection. It's in Dany's mind. And when Dany's like, are you here? And she's like, the glass candles are burning. So that's how, it's just as Marwyn explains later. You can use glass candles to project yourself and to enter people's dreams, even waking dreams. You can basically just put yourself in people's heads. It could be that Dany needed to slip into a little bit of a dream first, and then that enabled Quaithe to get a hold of her. Hard to say. But we see it in operation on top of the pyramid. So these glass candles are powerful. And why did I did this out of order? Sorry, we're going to do the Marwyn agenda and then the Great Empire of the Dawn. So the thing about the Ahai truth is that Dany's going to use a glass candle to find it. And it's easy to figure this out. This is one of the most logical theories that I've come up with. And I can't believe that I was the first one to come up with this, because really this is like a no-brainer. Marwyn the Mage is the Archmaester of Magic. So he has the Valyrian steel rod, ring, and mask. The higher mysteries, they call it. It just means that the Citadel does have a branch that studies the higher mysteries, or at least catalogs them. Okay, they're skeptical about magic, but they do know that magic is real. And they probably collect talismans at the Citadel, too. Marwyn the Mage, as the Archmaester of the higher mysteries at the Citadel, he is the one in charge of the magical artifacts. And that is why we see one of the Citadel's glass candles burning in his chamber. And that's in the Sam, A Feast for Crows epilogue. He is led by Leo Tyrell and Alaris the Sphinx into Marwyn's chamber, and they got a big candle. It's lit. It is burning with the weird white light that doesn't flicker. Just, it's steady. And in fact, I'll give you my full glass candle artwork since I made it and own the rights to it. So here is, okay, yes. So they have different color ones. That's the green one. The Citadel supposedly has 4, 3 black and 1 green. Stannis refers to different colored dragon glass on Dragonstone, red and purple and green, I think he says. So not only are there different colors of dragon glass, but there are different colors of glass candles. Do they do different things? Very possibly. We don't know. Wouldn't be surprised. But we don't know. We just know there's at least 1 green one. So there it is. I made a green one. And there's a black one in a little alcove in the Citadel. This is what I picture it looking like. And then here's when it's lit. It has a weird white flame. It's like high contrast light. It makes the blacks blacker and the whites whiter. But everything is like harsh. Like the blacks are like holes and the whites are like, it's like a unpleasant light. So it's kind of a harsh thing, the glass candle. It's weird. And like I said, it doesn't flicker or waver. It's strongly implied that it has to be lit with blood magic, because there's this weird tradition of the acolytes of the Citadel having to spend a night in the dark with a glass candle to teach them that magic doesn't work. And it's always said that, many people try to light it and they'll come out the next day and their hands will be all bloody, but no, it never works. It's like, well, how do you light a glass candle? You have to give it blood, of course. All Valyrian magic works on fire and blood, as Marwyn says. So Marwyn probably bled to light the candle because he knows how to do that stuff. But the point is, the Citadel has at least 4, and Marwyn controls them. And Marwyn has been using them. To the point, like I said, when Sam shows up Marwyn's like, yeah, I pretty much know everything, but just go over it just in case I miss something. And so that implies the scrying power of the candle is very strong, and Marwyn has been using it. He's been staying abreast of things. And now he's going to Daenerys. So he's kind of setting himself up as a general. He tells Sam, hurry up and forge your chain. That knowledge, you'll be needed on the wall again. So Marwyn is like, I'm going to go to Slaver's Bay. He's chewing sour leaf, He's like, I'm going to go to Slaver's Bay, and I'm going to bring back Daenerys, and you go get your chain, and you'll be needed on the wall, and we'll pull this shit together. You watch. So he's setting himself up as a long night general, a dawn war general. It's pretty clear, which is why I love Marwyn the Mage. Sour leaf is kind of a nasty habit, but I'll work on the Marwyn voice so it's a little different than Dick, but it's got some gravel. The big thing here is like, okay, so if he's in charge of the glass candles, if he knows how to use them, he knows how powerful they are, and he's been using them to keep abreast of everything at the wall, which is where the threat's going to come. Now he's getting on a swan ship of the Summer Islanders, which is a good pick because they're fast. Because he's trying to race the Citadel to Daenerys. He's worried that Citadel will try to kill Daenerys. Grand Maester conspiracy, shout out. He's actually the originator of the conspiracy. But if you're Marwyn and you've made, you're planning on organizing the forces of light to fight against the war, fight the war for the dawn, and you've been using this glass candle to keep up on everything at the wall, and now you're going to help Dany and her dragons come to Westeros, are you bringing one of the glass candles with you? Of course you are. There's more than just the one in his chamber. Nobody's using them. They're just in a display case somewhere. So of course Marwyn grabbed one of them and threw it in his SKB travel case and brought it with him. Of course he did. Because it'll be so useful. Once they get to Slaver's Bay, he can get in touch with Sam and his other acolytes back in the Citadel. He can keep up with what's going on the wall. It would be stupid to not bring a candle. It's such an advantage. I mean, it's not even funny. And he's going so far. It's going to take months, round trip. So he could either know nothing during that whole time, or he can bring a candle and stay up to date on everything. Not a choice, really. So he's going to Slaver's Bay. He's a pretty clever dude. We don't know when he'll turn up, but he is on a swan ship as of the end of Feast on the way to Slaver's Bay. He might be there by now. We do not know. I suspect he will turn up some point when Barristan and Tyrion and Vic are waiting for Dany to return to Slaver's Bay. I bet you Marwyn will appear at that point, but we will see. And the point is, he's going to have a glass candle. So Dany will then end up using the glass candle. And that is how she will communicate with Quaithe and learn this truth of Ahai. And we'll get into that. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Sorry, let me go back. Let's talk about the Great Empire of the Dawn, because this probably is something. This is the truth in Ahai. It's got to have something to do with this. All right. So this top artwork is by Atlantis Morissette, and the bottom artwork is by Martin H. Mathis. The bottom one is the 5 forts, and the upper one is the gemstone emperors of the Great Empire of the Dawn. So me connecting them with the Great Empire of the Dawn is technically a theory. They're not labeled. They are kingly ghosts, dressed in the faded raiment of kings. They have gemstone eyes, opal, amethyst, tourmaline, and jade. And in their hands are swords of pale fire. Their hair is gold, silver, and platinum white. Gold, silver, and platinum white, that's a Valyrian hair, exactly the same. And the one with amethyst eyes would look like a Valyrian. And you can see that, the second one over there. Amethyst eyes, silver hair, looks like a Valyrian. Skin tone is not mentioned. Atlantis drew a multi-ethnic array because, as we've said, the Great Empire of the Dawn was such a huge empire that ruled over so many different peoples that inevitably they would have been a multi-ethnic empire, and probably different ruling houses and clans would have taken power at different times. So one of them looks more Eastern, one looks, kind of African, one looks whatever. So maybe like Eastern European, you might say. So good job by Atlantis on that. And that just, again, goes to the point that Great Empire of the Dawn was not one little people, but rather a giant conglomerate empire of some kind. But the point is, they've all got Valyrian hair. So there's these different eye colors, and one of them is purple, But there are these other eye colors too, and they have flaming swords. So right away, in Game of Thrones, we don't know anything about the Great Empire of the Dawn. That information was in the World of Ice and Fire. But we do know that when we see silver hair, that's Valyrian. And one of them has purple eyes, that's Valyrian. And flaming swords, well, that's Lightbringer. And Lightbringer is at least tangentially associated with dragons in Valyria, we think, at this point. So it seems like these are Dany's ancestors. And I think the reader assumes they're like weird Valyrians. But then, in the World of Ice and Fire, we get the description of the Great Empire of the Dawn, which I believe were the builders of Ahai, so that's the same thing. And the ruling emperors of the Great Empire of the Dawn are named after gemstones, and there's 8 of them, but 4 of them are opal, amethyst, tourmaline, and jade. So now it's like, oh, well, that's who those were, those kingly ghosts. They were the dragon lords that came before Valyria from Ahai, because we've been hearing since book 1 that dragons and dragon eggs come from Ahai. And then also in the World of Ice and Fire, Septon Barth says that men from the Shadowlands in Ahai might have taught the Valyrians how to ride dragons. So again, there's this link like, oh, maybe the Valyrians' dragon connection comes from Ahai first. And so now we see, we have this connection of the Great Empire of the Dawn, these kingly ghosts, fire swords, Valyrian hair, and the idea that there's multiple eye colors makes sense. It's like, oh, well, the Valyrians were just one survivor. They descend from the Amethyst Emperor, Empress, their clan or house line, the people that had purple eyes. But these other eye colors probably represent different clans and houses and things. So the Valyrians are survivors from the Great Empire of the Dawn. We did a whole Great Empire of the Dawn Iceberg, so you guys know what that's about. But the point is, this vision comes early. Dany sees them early on, and they are telling her to wake the dragon. So this is part of the same, Dany's reaching for intuitive magical knowledge. It's coming to her from the dragon's egg itself with these dragon dreams. It's coming from Quaithe through the glass candle influence. And we don't know if Quaithe is tampering with Dany all the way back into Game of Thrones. I think possibly. Hard to say. But these kingly ghosts definitely exist. They're definitely real ghosts from the Great Empire of the Dawn. So probably we might see these people again when Dany gets a glass candle. So when Dany uses a glass candle to get truth in Ahai, maybe she'll just be spirit walking around all the oily black stone buildings. But maybe she'll see these kingly ghosts again, and maybe they'll say something more than wake the dragon. It's interesting that Quaithe, who says there's truth in Ahai, well, it's like, well, again, we've been told that there are dragons that may come from Ahai. Azor Ahai's legend is from Ahai. So we can pretty much figure out this truth has something to do with Azor Ahai, Lightbringer, and all that crap. So this is the Long Night legacy that I was talking about. So there's a Valyrian legacy of slavery and stuff that Dany's atoning for, but there's also the Long Night legacy of Azor Ahai and the Night's King or whatever that Jon and Dany have to fix as well. So it's more that mirroring of the sort of the plot themes and the magical themes. It's all about this atonement. Okay, so the Stannis lesson, this is pretty simple. It's insightful, but it's not complex. Stannis is blazing a path that really seems like the path that Dany's going to follow. And it goes like this. Stannis is declared Azor Ahai on Dragonstone. Then he tries to take King's Landing. A bunch of wildfire goes off, doesn't go very well. He regroups at Dragonstone, then hears about a threat in the north, has a crisis of conscience, realizes if I want to be king, it's actually a duty, not a right, and I'm trying to claim the chair by rights, and really it's a duty, and I need to go and protect the realm from this threat in the north. So he goes to the wall and fights a battle north of the wall, or at the wall, you want to say, and then messes with the Night's Watch a bit, and then goes to Winterfell. He's on his way to Winterfell in the middle of this incredible storm to try to fight against, I guess you'd call him a Night's King figure in the Boltons, but let's just say a battle at Winterfell. So for Dany, the path, it looks like would be the same thing. She's going to land on Dragonstone, most likely, when she returns to Westeros. She's going to have a ton of red priests with her, not just Benero, but possibly all of the Red Temple just on the move now. Possibly Mokoro too. So, whereas it was just Mel declaring Stannis Azor Ahai Reborn in this awesome artwork. This is another one by Magali Villeneuve. So, Stannis I mean, so Dany will be declared Azor Ahai Reborn by the Red Priest in some sort of ceremony, probably on Dragonstone. Then she will probably try to take King's Landing, and it probably will not go well. Some of those wildfire caches will surely go off. She'll be horrified instead of like, this is awesome, because we know who Dany is. She is not someone, she's constantly worried about collateral damage. Let's just put it that way. Both from the Dothraki and the dragons. She thinks about both things. When I go to Westeros, what will happen? Will the Dothraki just rape and pillage? That's not what I want. What about the dragons? Are they monsters? So Dany's someone who doesn't want collateral damage. So if she attacks King's Landing, wildfire starts going off and thousands of people are burning and dying, like, she's going to be horrified by that. Not sure what all is going to go down, but it'll be some further destruction of King's Landing. And remember, Cersei and Fagon are going to fight over King's Landing before Dany ever gets there. So it's already going to be kind of rocked by the time Dany gets there. And then it'll get rocked even further. But no doubt, Dany will make some move at trying to take King's Landing that will probably not work, and she probably will have to call it off, right? Or maybe she'll take it, but she'll be horrified by the carnage. You know, some sort of loose parallel to Stannis and his wildfire trying to take King's Landing. Then you'll have Dany hearing about the threat from the north, obviously from Jon Snow, who actually is the one who told Stannis too, or I guess maybe it was Mormont at that time that sent the letter. I can't remember. Maybe it was Jon Snow that sent out the letter. Dany is the breaker of chains. Stannis was foiled by Tyrion's chain in the Blackwater, foreshadowing that she'll be successful in her attack. I didn't think about that, Scott. That's interesting. Like I said, I don't know. Even if she's successful, I think it'll be like kind of an awful thing. So we'll have to see. Well, yeah. Okay. So you see the pattern there. It makes a lot of sense. And then of course, Dany hears a threat, goes to the north, fights a battle at the wall, and then ends up going to Winterfell, perhaps to continue fighting against the others. I also think that the whole going to Winterfell part could actually be Dany going to the heart of winter instead, because Winterfell is the heart of an epic snowstorm at that moment. The snowstorm is coming from Winterfell. It's radiating from Winterfell. It's not even cold up on the wall. The wall's weeping at the same time as it's this 40-foot snowstorm around Winterfell. So it's really dramatic. It's probably because there's no Stark in Winterfell. It's a magical storm, probably. But the point is, this last part of the arc where Stannis is going to Winterfell in a snowstorm, that's probably Jon and Dany going to the heart of winter in a snowstorm. And so this also explains and makes sense of how Dany will interact with both Fagon and Jon. Fagon is going to be ruling in King's Landing, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So Dany's going to conflict with him there. And then she'll deal with Jon when Jon is trying to tell her about why it's so dark. It's like, well, you may have noticed that the sun hasn't come up in a few weeks, and I can tell you about that. There are these ice demons in this thing called the Weirwood Net. So you can see how this Stannis pattern fits the need to interact with both Fagon and Jon, as we know that Dany will. So I'll put the next slide up. We're going to talk about dragon dreams. We're going to get into some cool theories. I got a couple theories in this one. Dragon dreams are mostly, most of the dragon dreams that we talk to are about the Targaryens after they don't have dragons, right? Jon the Fiddler and Egg and Egg's brother, Darren the Drunkard. These are people that they don't have dragons anymore, but they're dreaming of dragons. Once you have dragons, the Targaryens still have like prophetic dreams and stuff, but most of the dragon dreams in the story talking about Targaryens who don't have dragons, but dream of them. So Dany does this. When she is carrying, it was me. I was the gray bar all along, says Grey Waste Tim. It was an honor of you, Tim. So Dany has 3 dragon dreams. I believe it's 3, definitely 2. I think it's 3 before she hatches the dragons. And it's pretty clear that the dreams are coming from the dragon's eggs or being, stirred on by them. Because the dragon in her dream is pretty clearly Drogon. It's a black dragon covered in red blood, just like Drogon has the little red markings. And of course, she's the one that has a connection. Drogon is the one she has a connection with. So she sees basically Drogon manifesting himself out of the egg before he's born. And it's interesting because these eggs are really old. If they're Alyssa Farman's eggs, then they're about 250 years old or so, maybe 240. So they appear to be stone. I mean, maybe the fresh eggs look like stone too, but it does seem like egg incubation is a thing. The show certainly ran with that idea, House of the Dragon, and I think it makes sense. If you think about the dragon's natural living habits, they live in volcanic vents. So it probably is important to keep their eggs warm. Nevertheless, even though Dany's eggs are old, they still are obviously able to wake, so they're still potent, and that dragon spirit in the egg seems to be reaching out to Dany. So now we realize why the Targaryens had this tradition of putting dragon's eggs in the cradles of the newborn Targaryens. And it says that the dragons that hatched from such eggs invariably bonded with the children, and the children invariably became dragon riders. So it works very well to put the eggs in the cradle. Why? Because the egg is literally giving the little baby dragon dreams before the egg even hatches. So that connection is beginning before the egg hatches. Yeah, so that makes sense, right? The egg is reaching out to the baby, and then when it hatches, they've already got a bond. And the dragon knows not to eat the baby that way. So that all works out well. And that's why, in case you've ever wondered, oh, isn't that dangerous? What if the dragon hatches and attacks the baby? Well, it happened at one time with Laena, but that wasn't a regular dragon. It was like a worm. So there was something wrong with that, which leads to Dracomorph theory. But that's why the eggs are put in the cradle, which Rhaena is the one who started that tradition. She must have intuited it, or maybe read it, or had a dream or something, that was what she should do. Going back to that phrase that Quaid says, the dragons know. Remember who you are. The dragons know. So it's like, yeah, the dragons do know stuff. They do know stuff. It's hard to say how smart and sentient there are, and there could be ancient Valyrian ancestor spirits in the dragons, as I like to discuss with lemur theory and all that. But yeah, somehow the dragons do have knowledge. And we see that it is being communicated to Dany through the dreams. It could be that as she bonds with Drogon more, she will have more dreams, and that Drogon will be able to literally feed Dany information, or that her instincts will be awakened by their bond, stuff like that. So Dany is rediscovering all the Valyrian arts with no teacher. And my friend compared this a little bit to Luke Skywalker after, the events of the movie, and Yoda's gone, and he's essentially got to learn how to be a Jedi by himself without any training. Or without anyone to continue teaching him. Dany's the same. She's intuiting everything, which is friggin' awesome. It's really badass. But yeah, she's doing it all by instinct, and as she continues to try to learn how to ride Drogon, it's the same thing. Like, she's doing it all by instinct. We'll see. I do think she'll get her hands on the dragon horn, so we'll get to see if that actually is something that helps you control dragons or not, or if it's just for calling comets. Oh, we're going to talk about Rhaego and the stallion who mounts the world. Oh boy. Yeah, this art is by Jonathan Burton, and it is a little disturbing, but you'd probably look a little disturbing if you were chowing down on a horse heart in some witchy-ass ceremony. You'd be like, no, don't take my picture right now. Rhaego is prophesied as the stallion who mounts the world. And I'll just go ahead and read this passage, because it's quite the passage. The wording is important. Jenny says, yes, but I wonder if something of her son's spirit became part of the dragon. You mean Rhaego? I do think it's possible that Rhaego's spirit went into the dragon. I think it's possible Drogo and Mirimaster and Rhaego all got stuffed into dragons. Absolutely. I think that's possible. Yes. As swift as the wind he rides, and behind him his Khalasar covers the earth. Men without number, with arcs shining in their hands like blades of razor grass. Fierce as a storm this prince will be. His enemies will tremble before him, and their wives will weep tears of blood and rend their flesh in grief. The bells in his hair will sing his coming, and the milkmen in their stone tents will fear his name. The old woman trembled and looked at Dany almost as if she were afraid. The prince is riding, and he should be the stallion who mounts the world. So it's kind of terrifying. A Khalasar that covers the earth, men without number. It's very, it's like, the wives of their foes will be terrified and weeping. This is awesome. It's just bloody conquest being worshipped and praised, because it's a Dothraki prophecy, but that's all they're talking about. They're like, Rhaego will be the greatest burner and pillager ever. And Dany even sees a vision in her series of, Wake the Dragon dream visions where it's like a tall, you see a vision of Rhaegar as a tall, half Dothraki, half Valyrian, dragony horse lord, and there's burning cities behind him. But then he turns to ash and disappears. Like, oh yeah, that person never got to exist. And, Miriam Azor, when she helps murder baby Rhaegar, which she almost certainly did, says, now he will burn no cities. And it's like, can sort of understand that move by Miriam Azor, right? It's like, yeah, you burnt my city. And you got this son coming, and he's going to be the biggest city burner ever. Well, no, actually not. Canceled, So Rhaegar is a nightmare. That's the truth of it. Rhaegar is a nightmare, Cleo. And this represents a warning about conquest. This is what Dany could be. If she takes her dragons and just tries to conquer Westeros and burn her enemies and sit on the Iron Chair. Remember when Drogo gives his speech after this prophecy, he's like, I will rape the women and I will destroy them all. And everyone's like, yeah. It's like, okay. So this is what we're talking about. This is a nightmare. This is the nightmare Dany. And we saw it on, the one thing I say that's useful about the terrible show ending, it's wrong because Dany wouldn't do that. But this is the path that Dany's not going to go down. Like, this is the dark road that she could go down, is to just try to use her dragons to conquer and put herself on the throne of some land, anywhere. That makes her not only no better than any other lord, but worse, because she has more destructive weapons. So the only way for Dany to be heroic is to use her dragons to fight the others. That seems very simple and straightforward. I hope everybody's on the same page with that. So again, the Iron Throne test just comes down to, are you going to use the dragons to try to put yourself on the throne, or are you going to use them to save everyone? The real queen protects her people. And Dany knows that, so I'm confident she will do that. But this Rhaegar thing is a warning, and it's very important coming early in the story. Now, not only does this prophecy sound vaguely sinister, it's also specifically sinister. So there's a Khalasar, men without number. They hold shining blades in their hand, and the blades are like razor grass. Now, so think of a type of grass that looks like shining blades that covers the earth. Well, there is such a thing in the story. It's called ghost grass. It grows only in Ahai. It's the only thing that does grow in Ahai, and it kills everything else wherever it grows. And the stalks of the ghost grass are taller than a man on horseback, so like 6-8 feet tall, and they glow in the dark with the spirits of the damned. So they basically look like dawn swords. Oh, the stalks, right, they're compared to milk glass also. So it's like glowing stalks of milk glass, blades of milk glass that glow with the spirits of the damned. And dawn, of course, might be Lightbringer, and Lightbringer is said to absorb the spirit of Nissa, and that's why it's on fire now. So literally, Lightbringer glows with the spirits of the damned. So this ghost grass is a very important symbol. The Dothraki have a prophecy also that the ghost grass one day will cover the world and kill everything. And that's actually the same prophecy as the stallion prophecy. His Khalasar covers the earth, men without number, with arcs shining in their hands like blades of razor grass, covering the earth. That's the same prophecy as ghost grass covering the earth. So it's cool. And also the others, of course, wield glowing blades. They are the souls of the damned, and their whole plan is to cover the earth with winter and kill everything. So the milk glass very much represents the invasion of the others. And that is being paralleled here in this prophecy of this Khalasar that covers the earth. So all of this is bad. Rhaegar, it's a nightmare. So there's another side to this, however, and that's the stallion who mounts the world, who is Drogon. Or you might say Dany riding Drogon. So dragons and horses, they're likened in many ways. Dany observes the dragons as having horse-shaped heads. She dreams she was Rhaegar at the Trident, but riding a dragon instead of a horse. She talks about how the whip makes the dragon turn towards the whip, but a horse goes away from the whip. horses are the other thing you ride. Dany rides the silver horse and then rides her dragon. So, whatever. The stallion who mounts the world is just a flying dragon. That works. He mounts the world because he flies over the world. Also, you think of Dany's dragons, a flaming sword over the world, right? They are a threat over the world. The stallion who mounts the world. Now, this has more specific foreshadowing of how this is going to work. The mother of mountains. The Dothraki have a twin symbol. They have the womb of the world, which is a lake, and they have the mother of mountains, right? And I got this cool picture. The one on the screen right now is John Jude Palancar, and we'll come back to this. This is Keegan Verberg here. This is the womb of the world, the mother of mountains, 2 moons that used to be in the sky, and the first rider emerging from the lake. Greywaste Tim says, Rhaegar would be a stallion and a dragon. Bittersteel sigil. He was Bittersteel come again. Bloodraven's still gunning for him beyond the grave. Oh, Bloodraven killed Rhaegar. That's what happened. He's like, you remind me of Bittersteel. Oh, that's funny. Bloodraven lifts a finger and Rhaegar dies. I'll talk about the Doshklian Marine in a minute. I just want to show you the womb of the world here. So this double symbol, it's all, so the mother of mountains, and of course, a mound is a feminine sexual symbol, okay? So this is the mother mound, and right beneath it is a womb, out of which the first Dothraki horse and rider emerged, so says their folklore. So it's all pretty straightforward, feminine birthing symbolism with both the mother of mountains and the womb of the world, and Dany does a rebirth ceremony in the womb of the world, okay? Now, the thing about the mother of mountains, only men are allowed to ascend the mother of mountains. Mount the mother of mountains, you would say. So there's a further sexual allusion there. At some point when they went back to Vaes Dothrak and were doing this stallion who mounts the world stuff, the night before or after, I forget which, Drogo ascends the mother of mountains to commune with the gods and then comes down. But women aren't allowed. So again, it's a very sexual thing. Men mounting the mother mound and then coming back and then doing fertility rituals with the promised babies and stuff. But the thing is, Dany is here to break all the Dothraki traditions. She already broke the tradition of raping and pillaging and claiming women and stuff like that. Yes, this will be a Moses thing. Thank you. So the Mother of Mountains Men's Club, I'm pretty sure Dany's going to break that because she is, as the Khaleesi, she is going to be the Khal of Khals. So that's the whole thing. The stallion who mounts the world is supposed to be the Khal of Khals. That's going to be Dany who's going to unite the Dothraki. And so she, using Drogon, who is the stallion, will mount the Mother of Mountains. And in doing so, establish herself as the preeminent power, as the Khaleesi of Khaleesi's. She probably will kill or subjugate the Khals at some point in this process. And I like what the show did with her burning them in the tent. That was sick. But something will happen. And yes, it will be a Moses-like thing where she comes down from the mountain, shining with the radiance of God, as Moses did. Perhaps that'll be dragon fire or something like that. But yeah, she's definitely going to ascend the Mother of Mountains on Drogon, just as Drogo ascended the Mother of Mountains. And there'll be some lesbian symbolism to celebrate. Yeah, there sure will be, I guess. Yeah. So, but Drogon will be there to do the dick symbolism, you know, the flaming sword stuff. So you can call it what you want. Everything's fluid, you know, with those Valyrians and Targaryens. They're all, you see in the tapestries, there's men and women and dragons, and they're all slithering around, you know, that's how they roll. So, yeah, anyway. Dany will definitely ascend the Mother of Mountains with Drogon, and that will be the fulfillment of the stallion who mounts the world, and then she will take control of all the Khalasars and lead them out of Vaes Dothrak and unite the clans, and that'll be that. It'll be pretty dope. George needs to hurry up, write that, and get her back to Westeros, so we got to do this quick. This should happen in the early parts of Winds of Winter, essentially. It'll be the first Dany chapter might open, and she's already in Vaes Dothrak, and George will do his whole thing where she flashes back to the journey there, and then we have a couple chapters in Vaes Dothrak, and and she'll be getting back to Slaver's Bay, and then back to Westeros. Got to supervise those Ironborn. Tyrion and Victarion and Barristan will be doing some Three Stooges routine. Dany's got to break up. So yeah, that's the stallion who mounts the world. You guys get it. I think that's a pretty solid theory. Now here's where it gets a little even more deep. So check this out. How's Dany gonna leave Meereen? That's been a question, right? It's a mess. In the show, she just left Daario in charge and took off. That's pretty, I mean, you can picture the writing room on that one. What are we gonna do about Meereen? How does George seems stuck on that too? Like, how are we gonna get Dany out of there? I don't know, just leave Daario in charge, I guess. All right. See ya. Bye. See ya. Have fun storming the castle. Bye. Like, to be serious, Daario is important as far as what he represents as a philosophy. Daario is war and woe. Daario, he has a solution. Dany's like, man, what should I do about these slave lords and their pyramids? And Daario's like, oh, just have a wedding or like a dinner or something. Invite everybody over and then chop their heads off. Problem solved. So he's all like, reading out of Tywin's playbook. He's like, here it says in the chapter called Red Wedding 101, it says invite everybody over to a party and kill them. He also wants to kill the hostage children that Dany refuses to harm because Dany's a good person, refuses to harm the children of the slave lords. So how are we going to leave? We get to leave somebody in charge. So Daario is war and woe. And Dany says to him, well, you would have me be a butcher. And he's like, oh, all kings and queens are butchers. So Daario's got this very black and white philosophy. He's like, well, you got to kill some people, so whatever. Just kill who you want. Dany obviously is trying to do things a little more judiciously. Okay, so she doesn't go for Daario's butcher king philosophy. At least not yet. Maybe she will, but she hasn't yet. So he kind of represents, and I've often compared Daemon Targaryen to Daario. Daario doesn't have the privilege of Daemon. He's not a prince. He's a sellsword. But they more or less have a similar philosophy and sort of presence in the room. They're both probably a good lay. They both might kill you if you're inconvenient. Daario brought the heads of his two commanders to Dany when they didn't want to do what he wanted to do. So I can see Daemon doing that exact thing. I really can. So yeah, kill them all and let God sort them and let Euron sort them out. Exactly, Grey Waste Tim. That is what Daario would have Dany do. Kill them all and let Euron sort them out. So, as you can see from the slide up here, I think the solution will be that Dany will lead the Dosh Khaleen out of Vaes Dothrak and to Slaver's Bay, and that they will have a large part to play helping create a new, more stable situation for everyone. Now, the Dosh Khaleen, think about the skills that they have. They are city administrators. That's what they do. The only city is Vaes Dothrak. It is huge. And they do a very hard thing, which is they absorb Khalasars that leave and come back. And there are homes and things built into the ground. They build these underground homes in Vaes Dothrak. It's not all just tents. So the Dosh Khaleen they are city administrators, and they are also former wives of Khals. They are former Khaleesi's, all of them, which means they understand political power. They understand leadership. They've been right there at the right hand of the Khal, watching him do things and doing leadership themselves. Because as we've seen, a Khaleesi is an important figure in the Khalasar. So we've got all these former Khaleesi's, basically their skills going to waste in Vaes Dothrak. And in Slaver's Bay, we have a need for city administrators. And guess what? In Slaver's Bay, they have a tradition of listening to wise women, who they call the Graces. These women are very respected, the Temple Graces, and everyone listens to them. So there's already like a means, culturally, for the wise women of the Dosh Khaleen to sort of slide into that respect level of society as Graces and wise women that will help dispense justice and administer the city. Finally, Dany has a vision in the House of the Undying, and it says the crones, 1,000 crones, heads bowed, crept from a great lake. The key is from the lake. The lake is the womb of the world. The Dothraki believe that the first horse and rider emerged from the womb of the world. So that is a creation. Remember, the womb, it's a creation point. The Dothraki come from the womb of the world. Okay? So when we see the crones coming out of the womb of the world, that's a rebirth symbolism. They are being reborn with their heads bowed to Dany. And they are creeping from the lake because Dany will lead them out of Vaes Dothrak. And of course she will. It makes logical sense, as well as lining up with the vision. Because Dany was about to have her life wasted in Vaes Dothrak. And she's like, I don't want to do that. So of course she's going to sympathize with all the other women that are having their lives wasted there. And the show handled that really well, by the way. That was a good job, whoever did that. So I think we'll see something similar. And I think, Dany will lead those crones from Vaes Dothrak, and they will be reborn with a new purpose. And she will continue her trend of upending Dothraki tradition and creating more just society. And then she'll be knitting together the loose ends of the Dothraki plot line with her Slaver's Bay plot line. So that makes a ton of sense to me. I'll be very surprised if it doesn't happen. Me and Quinn came up with that on our Winds of Winter preview stream. So that's our theory. I think we came up with that in our discussion before those episodes. So we've already gotten into some of this glass candle stuff, but like I said, Marwyn definitely, for sure, 100% is bringing a friggin' glass candle to Slaver's Bay. There's no way he's not. Like I said, there's just no way in Marwyn's position you'd go to Slaver's Bay without one. So Dany is going to get her hands on a glass candle. And this also explains, well, she can't go to Ahai physically, so how are we going to do that in less time? Well, Quaithe already has a glass candle. So Dany will be able to communicate with her. She'll be able to, like I said, probably see the Gemstone Emperors again. And just to highlight, the glass candles are incredibly powerful. If Dany is attempting to retake Westeros, if she is trying to burn Volantis, if she's trying to coordinate a fleet sailing from Slaver's Bay to Westeros, the glass candle will be helpful. And it makes her a more terrifying specter as well, as far as like a powerful opponent for Fagon or anyone that wants to stand against her. She's going to be gathering information with this glass candle. It's very easy to see that George is essentially steering Dany towards a place where she's going to be the recreation of a full Valyrian sorceress or sorcerer. The glass candle, she's riding dragons. The Dragonbinder horn is coming to her in her direction under the control of someone who wants to ally with her. So she's going to start looking like a full Valyrian here. All she needs is a suit of armor, pretty much, and one of them swords, which there's plenty of swords around. So Dany this is just so cool to think about. Just George recreating a full Valyrian sorceress in Dany using the glass candle. And it's, like I said, going to make her powerful. She'll be able to communicate. Maybe she'll start not interfering, but like, maybe she'll make contact with Jon Snow because she's already seen the blue rose growing from a chink in the wall in her undying vision. So at some point, her and Jon might start having dream contact. And a glass candle could make it happen. But the thing I want to warn about is first-time drivers on the Cosmic Highway. So there seems to be one Cosmic Highway, if you will. Melisandre gazes into the flames and sees the faces, the symbolic faces of Bran and Bloodraven. And the Ghost of Highheart and the Undying and Patchface all see the Red Wedding coming, even though they're all using different magic. Melisandre, her fire magic is stronger at the wall, which is a hinge of the world made of ice. So it seems like magic all has certain common elements, and specifically with psychic vision and travel, we can all bump into each other on the Cosmic Highway. So beware of first-time drivers. When Dany gets her candle, hopefully Marwyn will counsel her, and Quaithe maybe as well. But my whole point is that, yes, Euron probably has a glass candle, and Dany might run into him or other bad entities out there. Because remember, the Gemstone Emperors manifested to her in her dreams. So who else could manifest in her dreams? We don't know. George is into Lovecraft. There's all kinds of spirits that could be out there. So yeah, Marwyn should be advising her on the use of the candle, but that doesn't mean that once she's out using the candle and having visions, like that could make her vulnerable to other sorcerers who are more experienced, namely Euron. Now, obviously, it says the Quaithe phone. Quaithe is projecting herself to Dany. But if Dany has a candle too, they can probably communicate a lot better. Maybe the reason why Quaithe is so cryptic, for example, is in part because she only has a limited time she can use the candle. She's so far and it takes magic or whatever. It's possible that, when Dany's got a candle, it'll be easier for them to talk in longer sentences, essentially. And they can, get a little more done. But Dany can also gather information for herself that isn't depending on Quaithe with a candle. But let's get to the Euron thing, because this is actually the critical thing. Euron Night Watcher. Euron is watching. Okay, he is watching. And here's how we know this. When Victarion is sailing to Slaver's Bay, Moqorro says, yeah, I keep seeing the one black eye shining with malice or whatever, the sea of blood. That's Euron's eye, obviously. And so it just implies like he's keeping watch over Victarion. He gave him the Dragonbinder horn. Victarion thinks he could just use the horn himself and double-cross Euron. There's no way Victarion is outsmarting Euron. We all know that. So there's some trap with the horn. And Moqorro talks about, doesn't matter who blows it, it's who claimed it, which implies maybe Euron already claimed it or whatever. So Euron, there's a trap with the horn. And the visions imply that he's watching Vic. The reason why I think he's doing that with a glass candle is because there's this fellow in Qarth called Euron Nightwalker. And in the second book, once the dragons are born, somebody else tells Dany, the glass candle, I think it's Xaro's own Daxos, says the glass candles are burning again in the house of Euron Nightwalker. That's all we know. Who's that? Well, not only is Euron and Euron similar names, there is an Ironborn in history that Euron specifically parallels, named Euron Goodbrother, nicknamed Bad Brother. He's the one who killed 13 captains at the King's Moot, and Naga's ribs ran red with blood, which is like a weird sacrifice symbolism. But that's Euron Nightwalker. Euron parallels him. Okay. So is Euron's alias Euron? It's like, well, Euron hasn't been in the Iron Islands for like 2 or 3 years. So where's he been? Here and there, Shy, Valyria, whatever. But he's got to have a base of operations somewhere, right? It's in Qarth. He is Euron Nightwalker. This is an alias that he's built up. And there's glass candles there. So yes, I do think Euron has a glass candle. That is how he is watching. And it may very well be that he has already messed with Dany's dreams. Because, as Grey Waste Tim was so excited to talk about in the chat, Dany has a dream where she's making love to Hisdar, and he turns into a warlock. And his lips are blue and bruised, like a warlock, and his member is cold as ice. So it's warlock and ice symbolism. But Euron, of course, has the blue lips of a warlock, and has a lot of ice and Night's King symbolism as well. So could this dream, is it just foreshadowing of Euron, or is it like Euron actually messing with Dany's dream? Not sure which, but it does, most people do think it's alluding to a Euron-Dany plot intersection of some kind, which is what Jenny was asking about a minute ago. So how's that going to go? Well, there's a couple of things. First, it's likely that Euron wants Dany for his own Nissa. He talks about her eyes being amethyst, which alludes to the Amethyst Empress in the Kingly Ghost with amethyst eyes that Dany saw. Because amethyst eyes, that phrase really isn't used anywhere else. And Euron, we've seen he likes to use women for blood magic, or anybody with valuable blood. So he impregnates Falia Flowers and then ties her to the prow of the ship, and seems set to sacrifice her in an act of blood magic. He's also collecting priests, and one of them is Aeron Damphair, who is also tied to the prow of a ship. So it seems like Euron is into the idea of using blood magic, killing people to work magic. That's what happened with Nissa and Lightbringer. Azor Ahai killed her, used her life essence to make a magic talisman. For better or worse, that's what happened. That's right in the story. That's not even heresy. So, does Euron want Dany to marry her because he just is egotistical and wants the hottest babe? Maybe. I mean, maybe. He is egotistical, but it seems like all his objectives are magical. And maybe it's a political objective. He marries Dany, then they can rule Westeros. That makes sense too. But I'm quite worried that Dany is the most powerful sacrifice, and that's why Euron wants her. And Dany obviously parallels Nissa. And Nissa not only was murdered to make Lightbringer, her cry cracked the moon, which I believe was the mechanism that created the long night, the moon cracking. And you get your meteor dragons being born from the moon, okay? So, yeah, I mean, Euron probably wants to he might want to kill Dany in order to use to make blood magic that will bring on the new long night. And that would involve Dragonbinder. Yes, exactly, Brynelius. Also, I'll just point out that Dany did go for Daario. And Euron and Daario, I mean, they're both cocky pirates. Dario's a little less creepy. He's more just like weird with his colored hair and stuff. But if Euron were to like play it nice, if he were to play it real nice, he might come across like Daario for a hot second, just a little. Yeah. So maybe, if he presents a good face, maybe Dany would even go for him, or even be like, okay, this is an ally that we could do. Did I say we could do? That's not what I meant. An ally that we could work with. Yes. She doesn't like the mud. I don't blame her. Quentin's pretty friggin' lame. Sorry, buddy. Gotta bring it. You gotta bring some game, buddy. You gotta bring some game. Quentin had no game. Game level 0. He's, the most beautiful woman in the world. I think I'll bring, checks notes, no game. See if that works for me. Oh, poor guy. Okay, so he was neither enchanted nor enchanting. Lamau. So here's the question, and this is what you're asking about, Jenny. How's this gonna go? Maybe the Ironborn will just be a taxi. Maybe all these swell fellows you see here, Victarion and Ralph the Limper and whoever else is there. I forget which pirates are with which Ironborn psycho. Makoro, obviously. This is Mike Hallstein, by the way. Absolutely sick art. Mike Hallstein. Makoro with his wildfire dragon staff. Sick Victarion axe. The beard and the hair. Like, this is Victarion to me. This is absolutely devastating. Mike Hallstein is great. And just real quick to go back to the last one I forgot. Oh, I'm 3 artists behind. Embarrassing. Let's regroup. The Karth image here is Richard Hescox, and the Euron image is Sheb's art. Glass candles me. This one is by Enrique Murguia. This is Ahai. That's Quaithe, by the way, on the bridge, hanging around Ahai. She's waiting for the glass candle phone to be free. She's just waiting in line. It's at the other side of the bridge. It's polite. You stand back a little bit so to give privacy. So that's Enrique Murguia. And then this one, this Dany is Unam et Solum. UNAMETSOLUM. Love this one. Very handy for Dany gazing into the candle because she's got that faraway look and the stars are there. So thanks to Unam et Solum, Enrique Murguia, and Richard Hescox, and Sheb's art. And this is Mike Hallstein. So maybe they'll just give Dany a ride. Maybe Barristan and Tyrion and Victarion will work something out. Dany will get back to Slaver's Bay, all ready to go. Barristan is stoked on any Westerosi, so he'll be all about it. He'll see them as, value. I mean, they need a fleet. They just do. They need a fleet to get back. George sailed a fleet there. It's pretty obvious that the Ironborn fleet will somehow transport all these new Dothraki soldiers and Unsullied and the freedmen that can fight and whoever, Lambsmen and all that. They'll all be hopping on these Ironborn boats. So what's the context of that? Will it just be that they're getting a ride? I mean, obviously it will start that way. If we're getting all the soldiers on there, they're not going to force thousands of soldiers on at the sword point. So some kind of alliance seems in the cards. But the thing is that Euron is bound to spring his trap sooner or later. He's given Vic this mission and this horn, and Vic thinks he's going to outsmart him, but he's not. So is Makoro working for Euron? Is the Dusky Woman working for Euron? Maybe Euron doesn't need anybody working for him because he has a glass candle. No doubt some of these Ironborn are loyal to him and not Vic. So the trap could be sprung in any number of ways. It could be that the dragon horn being blown in Slaver's Bay will make Viserion just fly back to the High Tower where Euron is waiting, and that's that. Maybe Euron will manifest with glass candle astral projection and work magic and have somebody kill Victarion, and maybe he'll talk to Dany that way, or maybe Euron will actually be able to show up in Slaver's Bay somehow, although that doesn't seem possible. Maybe he can steal somebody's body or something. I'm not really usually willing to go that far, but I kind of favor the idea that Euron's going to spring the trap closer to Westeros. Glastral projection. That's a bad name. That's a band name. Forget all those other ones. Your band name has to be a word that's not a real word, that sounds like a real word, that's made of real words. Glastral projection. That is hot. Somebody steal that shit. You don't even need to know what it means. So, will Euron spring his trap closer to Westeros? Will Euron spring his trap in a way that puts Dany off and exposes him as a dark sorcerer? Will Euron take Dany hostage or prisoner at some point, or try to? What is Mokoro's agenda? Probably to serve the Red Temple, but we've seen Mel has her own agenda. Mokoro's very powerful, and he is a free agent, so we can't assume he's just the same as Benero. I think he probably is, but it's hard to say. I think he's more likely to play Victarion and help Dany, but you can't like be sure of that. Hang on. So yeah, what is Mokoro's agenda? We do not know. We do not know, but it's going to come into play. But let's go on. So this Dany Dragonbinder is the rest of this conversation. Euron's trap probably has something to do with Dragonbinder. So let's talk about Dragonbinder. The inscription on it, which is in Valyrian glyphs, says, "No mortal man can sound me and live." Now, in my video, Dany Dragonbinder, which uses this artwork by Sebastian Horosco. This is called Dany the Red Priestess, by the way. So this is imagining Dany maybe like on Dragonstone after the Red Temple is like officially outfitting her as, maybe they have special Azor Ahai hot babe armor that they lace up for Dany. So, something like that. This is more of a like a Frank Franzetta 70s era fantasy version of Dany, which is cool and totally valid, by the way. Okay, so no mortal man may sound me and live. It reminds me of Eowyn. It just, yeah, exactly. A Theory of Ice and Fire. It really does. She, pulls off the helmet. I am no man. And it's like, oh, a woman killed you. Now, that's mostly like a kind of a irony of prophecy thing from Tolkien. Dragonbinder, I just want to be clear about this because some people misinterpreted this. Dragonbinder, it's not that it can be blown by women, but not men. That's not it, okay? The no mortal man thing, the language calls out to Tolkien just as a nod. The key is that Dany is not a mortal. Not that she's not a man. It's not about gender. Dragons don't even have gender. It's not about that. It's about the mortality. Dany is a blood of the dragon person. She is a lizard person with dragon DNA in her veins that got there through magic. Okay? That's why she has a synergy with the dragon's egg and gets the dreams from it. So all these people blowing Dragonbinder, what happens to them? They get their lungs burned, right? Well, Dany has shown the miraculous ability to survive fire a couple of times. George says it's not a guaranteed, it's not a fire immunity, but we've seen it twice now. Her hair did get burned in the Drogon incident, and her hands were burned a little bit, but we have to assume that a normal person probably would have had it worse. And we saw her walk into the pyre, of course, when she hatched the dragons. So it would be no surprise if Dany is able to blow Dragonbinder and live. And that's even if she isn't resurrected, which could happen. She's surrounded by red priests who do resurrections. Jon is going to be resurrected. Jon and Dany are going to have some kind of a connection, which we'll talk about at the end. And so it would make a lot of sense if both Dany and Jon were both resurrected and put them on equal footing. Hey, the only sentient zombies in the world. You and me, babe. How about it? I wouldn't date you if you were the last fire white on earth. Oh, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, Jon. I'm kidding. You see how that could be. Dany could be whited. there's both a reason and a means. So here it comes down to armbands. It's all about the armbands. This is why I believe in this theory absolutely. There are several magical horns in the story, and all of the horn blowers have matching armbands to the horns. So first we have Tormund. Tormund produces the fake horn of Jormungand, the big one. It looks like Dragonbinder, but it has bands of old gold with First Man runes on it. But it's black and twisted. Melisandre burns it at the wall. You remember. Tormund has golden torques made of old gold with the runes of the First Men on them, just like Dragonbinder does. He has 2 around his arms that he gives to Jon as tithe, and he's got a much bigger one around his member, which he says he keeps. Sorry, I just wanted to trying to do Tormund justice for his boasting. But the golden torques are important. They go around the horns, and they go around the horn blowers, and they match. So then on with Dragonbinder, come here, girl. It's blown by Euron's mute, who's got that phoenix tattoo on him. Well, he also has armbands that match the bands on Dragonbinder. I believe they're gold with Valyrian glyphs. Dragonbinder has bands of gold and Valyrian steel with Valyrian glyphs. So his bands match the horn as well. Then we have Dany. The first scene Dany is in, where Dany's a slave in Illyrio's band. She's being sold. And remember, she's told, Drogo is so rich, all his servants wear golden collars around their necks. And then, as she's being dressed for the wedding, they slap a golden collar around her neck. It's called a torque, but it's a golden collar. And she's thinking to herself, oh my God, am I a slave? And yes, this is George telling us that Dany's a slave. Like I said, sold into marital slavery, wearing the golden collar of a slave. It's not meant to be a slave's collar. It's meant to be a decoration, but they're creating the parallel, right? Thing is, just like the horn blower from the King's Moot, these golden bands have Valyrian glyphs on them, and she has them on her arms and her neck, just like the hornblower. So, yeah, it's like, is Dany destined to blow the Dragonbinder horn, whose matching band she's worn, like all the other hornblowers? Like, yes. Yes, she is. And it makes plot sense, of course. No mortal man can blow it and live. Well, she's not a mortal man. She's damn lizard baby. So, lizard person. She's going to blow the horn. She's got the foreshadowing. She's got the abs, as you can see. That's from riding horses, man. When did Dany get magic abs from riding horses? For months. I've heard it's hard. How does that dress stay on? Well, it's the magic of the Azor Ahai babe armor. Defies gravity and science and magic. So the question is, there's another reason why Dany should blow Dragonbinder, and that's the Nissa symbolism. Dragonbinder is a representation of Nissa's cry that broke the moon. It's very simple. The legend says Nissa, stabbed by Lightbringer, a cry of anguish and ecstasy, left a crack across the face of the moon. And then from that crack comes the moon meteors, right? Now, a woman's scream didn't actually break the moon, but was a horn like Dragonbinder used to call a comet that broke the moon? Maybe. Because when Euron blows Dragonbinder, or has his servant blow Dragonbinder, at the King's Moot, 6 different words are applied to the sound that makes it sound like a woman's scream. It says, a shivering hot scream split the air like a sword thrust, a cry, keen, a wail, all these things. The key, shivering hot scream, so ice and fire scream, that split the air like a sword thrust. So this sound of Dragonbinder, this screaming dragon sound, is also like a sword that splits the air. Now, what really broke the moon? A comet, not a scream. It was a comet. But Dragonbinder encompasses both ideas. It sounds like a woman's scream, but it also sounds like a sword that splits the air, which is a comet. It literally is a dragon horn. A comet is likened to a dragon. And when the comet runs into things, you could imagine it stabbing things with its horn. Its horns are stabbing weapons, just like a sword which is another symbol for the comet. The Dragonbinder horn is a black Valyrian thing with Valyrian steel, just like the black Valyrian swords or Valyrian steel symbolize meteors and the comets. The main thing is the sound, though. Okay, so this horn sounds like a sword, and it sounds like an unholy scream that, quote, fills the whole world. So it splits the air like a sword thrust, and it fills the world. Nissa Nissa's cry that broke the moon is also, yes, it is god-awful, is a sound that fills the world and space itself. It's a sound that reached all the way to the moon. So it's the same idea. Then, just to help tie all this together, Martin gives us a Valyrian steel sword called Widow's Wail. Now we have Valyrian steel sword. It's named after a scream too. And Widow's Wail is one half of ice. And Arya looked right at the damn red comet and said, that looks like ice covered in blood. Then ice got split into two swords and dyed blood red, one of which is Widow's Wail. So again, you have this idea, a comet, a sword. It's also like a woman's scream. So this is all Nissa Nissa. This is moon-breaking talk. This is Nissa Nissa's cry that has something to do with the comet that broke the moon. The best sense I can make out of that is that somehow one of these magic horns was used by the Bloodstone Emperor to call the comet. And that is the sound. That is why there in the legend, there is this idea that there was a screaming sound that broke the moon. That was probably the magic horn that got blown to call the comet. Because again, Dragonbinder, comets are dragons. Comet binder, that's what the horn does. It's a comet binder horn. If done in the right circumstances. Perhaps, this is theory time. Remember, theory iceberg here. This is a theory. I'm quite sure Dany will blow the horn. The question is what will happen. Maybe Dany will blow the horn and just use it to bond with Drogon better. Or maybe she can control Viserion and Rhaegar as well with the horn. Or use the horn to help Jon or Tyrion ride Viserion or Rhaegar. But that seems a little low on the ambition scale. I think Dragonbinder's going to do a bit more than that. You know, and then you got these other ideas like, oh, the Horn of Winter breaks the wall somehow. Well, how's it do that? That might be the same idea, like a horn that calls meteors and comets down from the heavens. That's how it breaks the wall. That's how a horn wakes giants in the earth. So, and that's why it's called, you know, the Horn of Winter. Well, it's a horn that caused the long night if it's a comet binder. So, if, and this is, again, theory, if the Dragonbinder horn can call comets, it probably would only happen when it is blown under a certain circumstance with certain magic by a certain person, I would guess. Dany would be that person. And again, Dany is a Nissa Nissa figure. So if Dany blows the horn and it somehow calls a comet and provokes the long night, it would just be recreating the Azor Ahai legend with Dany as Nissa Nissa, the comet as her cry, reaching up to the heavens to break the moon by calling the red comet back. Now, if that is what's going to happen, then obviously Dany wouldn't know that that's what's going to happen. She wouldn't blow the horn if she knew it was going to cause the long night. However, maybe this is why Euron wants Dany, to have her blow the horn, to call the comet, to cause the apocalypse. Because look at the chapter, Dampire's Winds of Winter chapter, The Forsaken. Euron presents himself as this god figure on the Iron Throne. All the other gods are dead. And he says, I am the new god from the graves and charnel pits. The red comet signaled the end. The bleeding star signaled the end. So in this Lovecraftian sense, he is a new death god rising from the graves when the red comet comes. So it already came once, yes. But I think it has to come again in order to cause a new long night. So how's it going to come again? I'd want Dany to blow my horn too, says someone in the chat. That's fair. Dany is the new god that will rise from the charnel pits. Oh, I like that, A Theory of Ice and Fire. I like that. I do think Euron is Azor Ahai Reborn as well, and the third head of the dragon, but we'll get to that in a minute. I just think he's the dark version of it. But yeah, the question is, when Dany blows the horn, as I believe she will it be Euron springing a trap on her? Either, maybe she'll be giving her dragon to Euron by blowing the horn. I think it's the long night thing, but Will it be a trick? Or maybe if Dany blows the horn, it'll actually be a reversal. Maybe Dany will be able to steal the horn from Euron and reclaim it because it's a Valyrian thing and she's a real Valyrian. So maybe she can override whatever Euron has done with the horn. And I just want to note, the first slide, I made this armbands. And the second one, I came up with a better name. I was like, oh, this band sucks. Because it's just like they're slave bands, so they do suck, you know. Ovaltine Patrol says, I like to think the Valyrians casually called down meteors to accomplish all manner of sundry errands. Yeah, turn the lights off, you know, demolish the shed in the backyard. Let's call a meteor down. Let's give it a toot. Because we're told that the Valyrians use sorceress horns and binding spells to control their dragons. And maybe they did. Maybe the horns can do different things or different horns can do different things. But we've also seen that that's not necessary. Dany can, like, control her dragon to a certain extent just by having bonded with him. The whip does a certain amount of good. And then it's up to Drogon's will. So Dany really needs to contest with Drogon's will. But when she needs him and calls to him, he comes. And he probably sensed her need as well. There is a psychic link, as we've seen, when Dany orgasms, Drogon knows, you know. That's Drogo inside being jealous. Gabriel's trumpet. Oh, okay, that's cool, Peter Windhorse. Yeah, there's a lot of trumpets in Revelation that signal the end too. And there's Joshua blew the trumpets and knocked down the walls of Jericho. That's obviously a horn of Jormungand influence. There's a lot of biblical horns for sure. And they're all apocalyptic. That's what I mean. Like, Dragonbinder, I swear to God, if it literally just makes dragons obey you, I will be so friggin' disappointed. I really don't think that'll be it. The Western Wall in Jerusalem is also called the Wailing Wall. Of course it is. That might be interesting with the whole wailing, crying thing being attached to the horn. A Theory of Ice and Fire adds that after the sound of the shofar sounded a great blow, the Israelites shouted, and the city walls fell beneath them. Following God's law, the Israelites killed every man and woman of every age. Well, yeah, I mean, when they say get biblical, that's what they mean. All right, so burning Volantis, it's going to happen. It needs to happen. If Slaver's Bay is the hub of, like, the slave training of the slave economy, Volantis is, like, this is where the richest slave masters live. Even richer than the Myronese ones in pyramids, I'd like to think. At least, I would think. They are extremely wealthy. Their slaves do everything. Their slaves row their boats. Their slaves are their armies. Their slaves do literally everything. These are the worst kind of spoiled slave lords, all right? And they are very wealthy. They are the descendants of the Valyrians. They are the most direct descendant of the Valyrians. And they specifically lay claim to that mantle. So they own that shit, and they deserve to die. And I hope they rot in hell. So that's where we're at. That's where we're at. I guess we say unalived now, but whatever. That's coming. So this thing is set up so well. That's why we know it's going to happen. Like, the Relorists, almost all of the slaves are now Relorists in Volantis. And we know the Widow of the Waterfront is this very powerful underground figure who essentially seems to speak for the masses who yearn for revolution. Everybody, surprise, all the slaves in Volantis aren't having a great time and don't love it. And on addition to that, they now believe that Dany is Azor Ahai and that these slave masters of Volantis have cast their black eye on her and want to bring her down, which they do. Volantis just sailed a giant fleet to Meereen to kill Dany and force her to reinstitute slavery or kill her and reinstitute slavery, preferably that. That's one thing. We've got these two agents, the Red Temple and the Widow of the Waterfront and her network, that are able to coordinate the movements of basically all the lower class people in the city. Now, the richest of these disgusting, filthy slave lords, Volantine nobles, if you prefer. I got into an argument with Twitter yesterday, not with Twitter, well, also that, but on Twitter, with somebody who kept saying Myronese nobles. They would not say slave lords. I was like, listen, they're all slave lords. In Slaver's Bay, which is an entirely slave-based economy, every wealthy person is a slave lord. If they're not breeding slaves directly, their wealth comes from a slave economy, And they all own slaves. So yes, they deserve to die, and I hope they rot in hell. Like, what are you talking about, Marinese? No, although they weren't all slaves. They might not have all been slaves, and Dany made them dig trenches. She made them dig dishes, guys. This is the new bad talking point that I heard. Dany, she didn't end slavery in Slaver's Bay because she re-enslaved the Marinese nobles because she made them dig irrigation ditches. Marinese, whatever, dude, whatever. I'm just playing, Gabe. So, reason why this is a really dumb argument that we can laugh at. Because, based, super based. That's called triple think. It's like double think, but you go one further. So, mayonnaise, the mayonnaise nobles. Well, like I said, they're all guilty. Every single rich lord in Slaver's Bay is a slave master, and they are all guilty. There's no clean money there, okay? When Dany takes over executive power in Slaver's Bay, she changes the laws, outlaws slavery, and then these work gangs that she forms out of the former nobles, that's called a penalty. That's called a sentence. That's called a work sentence. She didn't even need that. Like, honestly, as the ruler of a city in wartime, you can declare martial law. If you need irrigation ditches dug so that everyone doesn't die, well, guess what? It's your job to make sure everyone doesn't die. And without the executive to force everyone to row in the same direction and dig the same ditches, you can't have everybody just deciding on their own to go out and dig irrigation ditches or not during the war. No, that's what happens during a war, is the people that rule a place will declare martial law, and they will have people do what they need to survive the war, which in this case is digging irrigation ditches because all their fields and trees are being destroyed and burnt. And the water, they were poisoning the river and stuff, so they had to reroute the water. So Dany, of course, has every right to take these former slave lords and say, get out there and dig fucking ditches. And no, you don't have a choice. And that does not constitute enslaving them again. They're not slaves. It's a temporary sentence, and they're guilty criminals and slave lords. Oh my God. So I repeat this argument because it is worthwhile, of course, to sort of talk out these things. It helps us understand the dynamics of what's really going on there. And I know you guys like to see me get fired up. So there it was. The Black Walls of Volantis. So these filthy, disgusting slave lords in Volantis, they all live inside these black walls. They're made out of Valyrian dragon-fused stone, and they're very uptight about it. Nobody but the purebloods can come inside the black walls. So they've already sorted everyone out. The unwashed masses are outside the black walls, and all the filthy slave lords are inside. So all we need to do, after Dany and the Ironborn destroy the Volantene fleet, they will then sail to Volantis, where the nobles have no way to escape, and they are all penned up inside the black walls. Then, when they see the dragons approaching, the widow of the waterfront and the Rhaegar will pull the plug, and all the slaves and underlings that are inside the black walls, serving the High Lords, will escape out the hidey holes, and Dany will burn everything inside the black walls. Every building, toasty. Just like we saw with King's Landing on the show, only she won't be burning commoners. She'll be burning down the houses of these filthy slave lords. This will be great because it makes sense for Dany to continue smashing the slave trade, to take out the people that sent the army against her. And this will also work for the story as far as people in Westeros beginning to fear Dany, the Mad Queen, Aerys' daughter, but with dragons. She's the city burner. Like, we can see that plot line is happening already. And I think George will continue to build up that dread so that as Dany approaches Westeros, there will be a shadow that's cast over Westeros. And this will be part of her realizing that, like, trying to take King's Landing by force is not the way to go, right? So this really does serve the plot. It'll be a justified use of violence, but it will show Dany, like, walking closer to a violent, darker path. Because, if you're a writer, it's like you want to make that moment when she puts down the quest for the Iron Throne and turns to face the others as this monumental thing. It should be hard. She should be stuck on this idea of trying to take King's Landing and think it's the right thing for a long time and then have to realize, oh, it's not, or else it won't mean anything. So she is going to, she is going to flirt with darkness. She is going to walk this edge. Absolutely. And she has to. As a dragon lord, fire and blood, remember? Like, you try to negotiate, but if that doesn't work, this shit's got to end. Fire and blood. So, freedom isn't free, as they say. Because freedom isn't free. Next point, and we're getting down to it here. Burning Volantis was actually the first one of the last chunk. So we're on the home stretch now. Who else in the chat will band together to dig an irrigation ditch under David Lightbringer's soundstage so all the spilt liquids and bird refuse can flow downhill and keep the stream going strong? Oh, follow King and Denorf on Instagram and elsewhere. That's who that is. Everyone's down. I appreciate it, guys. It's moving. I appreciate that. We need an irrigation ditch. Oh, God. So, Bam Bam Bonero. Those of you of a certain age, please don't declare martial law. Well, you better just dig the ditch voluntarily. We won't need the martial law. So, those of you of a certain age may remember the wrestler back when it was WWF, Bam Bam Bigelow. He had flames tattooed on his face and head. I don't know if that's where George got the idea, because he's a pretty old wrestler. But Bam Bam Bonero also has flames on his face and head. So he's a cool dude. He's R'hllor's champion. He is the high priest of R'hllor. He probably knows a lot about fire wights and fire others and all kinds of shadow binding and shit. And he thinks Dany is Azor Ahai Reborn. So when Dany stops by Volantis, she will definitely be picking up Bonero. And I'm actually looking forward to that. This might be one of Dany's best helpers, to be honest. They have 1,000 soldiers, the fiery hand with those spears, and they'll be handy. So, we might have Makoro on board. Probably. He's kind of an interesting character. I'd be disappointed if he died already, but who knows? And then we'll have lots of fanatics. And we've got the fanatics from the warrior sons in Westeros. So maybe we'll have a fanatic war between the R'hllorists, a religious fanatic war. I could see George doing that, just throwing that in the chaos mill right before the long night falls. And one of the best things about this, again, is the whiting thing. It says that everyone who dies in the cause of Azor Ahai Reborn will be reborn, and death itself will bend the knee. So maybe that's just like, you'll go to heaven if you fight for Azor Ahai. But the thing is, it probably means fire whiting, because the people that fight with Azor Ahai actually are fire whites, like the original Night's Watch, like Jon Snow is going to be. So how many zombies will we have is kind of what I'm asking. With lots of R'hllor priests, there could be a bunch of fire whites. I don't know how far George is going to take it, but coming up with a dozen for Jon's mission north, that ain't no problem at all. Melisandre can do that. So I'm curious to see how far. I mean, there's going to be grayscale in King's Landing. Maybe the R'hllorists will help with that, with their cleansing fire. What are the pyromancers going to think of the R'hllorists? Have some interesting theosophical discussions, yeah? So that's the R'hllorists will play into Dany's plotline is kind of the point. All right, now it's time for the really meaty stuff. Mummer's Dragon time. My name is Fagon. I'm carrying black steel. He is the Mummer's Dragon. It's really hard to debate that. First of all, the Blackfire Rebellions need a payoff. We need a 7th Blackfire Rebellion. There's that rusty dragon, 6 pieces washed ashore. They're waiting for the 7th one. If you guys know that foreshadowing from the elder brother. But we need another Blackfire Rebellion. We can see it's a big deal. And there's, clues. Illyrio talks about the Blackfire line. It's dead in the male line. It's like, well, how would he know it's only alive in the female line? Well, it's because he married Sarah Blackfire. Probably. He's sweet Sarah's hands. That's probably a Sarah Blackfire. Because we know that's a Targ name, Sarah. Which means that Fagon is Illyrio's son. And we know that Illyrio in his youth was live. And even still, he moves with grace and balance, even though he's incredibly large and round. So it seems that the statue in the courtyard of a 16-year-old youth, in a sword fighting pose, is Illyrio as a young man. So even though we shouldn't be like, how does gorgeous Fagon come from Illyrio? Well, Illyrio used to be hot shit. Ate too much cheese. I don't know. Not here to do any fat shaming, but nevertheless, Fagon is probably Illyrio's son and definitely a Blackfire. And specifically the Mummer's Dragon vision is what is important here. Dany sees a Mummer's Dragon, a cloth dragon on poles, cheered by the crowds. And it says, Mother of Dragons, Slayer of Lies. The Mummer's Dragon is a lie. And Illyrio and Varys are mummers. They literally are mummers. They do mummery. They use disguises. They used to be mummers when they were kids. So they are absolutely mummers. And their dragon is a mummer in that it's a fake dragon. So it's mummers with a fake dragon. So he's a mummer's dragon twice over. That's why it's obvious that it's him, because it's a double reference. Okay? The cheering crowds is easy to place because we can see that Phaegon is set to take King's Landing from Cersei. Varys is working on the inside. He's got allies in the Reach. He's blazing a path through the Stormlands. So yeah, Phaegon is definitely going to take King's Landing from Cersei. He will be cheered because Cersei's been doing a shit job, and Robert wasn't doing a great job, and Joffrey wasn't doing a great job, and it's gotten worse and worse. So by the time Rhaegar's son shows up, he's going to be cheered. He's going to be cheered by the crowds, and he's got a lot of people to help him administer the city. So yeah, for a time he'll be popular. Probably feed some people like Marge did, be popular. Maybe he'll even marry Marge. Marge has a habit of just, dating the new king as he comes up. So that's entirely possible. In fact, it's very possible. Of course, the book A Dance with Dragons is a reference to the events of House of the Dragon, which is called The Dance of the Dragons, which is the Targaryen Civil War. So the book A Dance with Dragons is implying that a dragon civil war is coming. And it's not going to be Jon against Dany. It's going to be Dany against Phaegon. And they're going to be fighting over the Iron Throne as the Targ Civil Wars go. So, yeah. Phaegon is in King's Landing. He's cheered by the crowds. And we need a dragon dance. Dany's coming to Westeros. She's got eyes for the Iron Throne. It's easy to see this conflict is coming. How's that going to go? Is Dany going to think he's really Rhaegar's son? Is she going to figure out the prophecy means that he's a mummer? Probably eventually. But I've got some theories for you. First of all, this is not a good plan. This is what Tyrion sold Phaegon on. And the art on the left is by Elfin Finn, and on the right is by Kirsty Carter. We already showed that. Hello, Auntie. I'd like a dragon, please. You've got 3. Can I have 1? It's not a good plan. That's not negotiating from a position of strength. So, what might happen is dragon food. Just to connect the slides here, the Mummer's Dragon is dragon food. See? Mummer's Dragon, dragon food. So there's this Dany with her dragon. That is by Sir Petrus. And then, no, I'm sorry. Dany and the Dragon is by Matthias Fernando. And Aegon Blackfire there is by Sir Petrus. I have grafted the images together. So here's Phaegon. Perhaps there is a stalemate. I have to think, look, George loves dialogue. He does not like huge battles. Dany and Phaegon will definitely talk. There will definitely be a meeting before the battle, or there will be the battle comes to a stalemate and they negotiate. One of them has the upper hand and the other one is brought to the other. They're going to have dialogue. And it will probably come down to Phaegon wanting to claim a dragon. So, go ahead. Be my guest. Maybe Phaegon has the upper hand even. Hard to say. Who knows? But, mild spoiler alert, if you don't know how Rhaenyra dies and don't want to know, then I guess tune out for a few minutes. But we're 4 hours deep into this Iceberg stream, so hopefully there's not any House of the Dragon unspoiled people out there. But Rhaenyra, of course, as we all know, say it with me at home in the chat, gets eaten by a dragon. The dragon of her rival in the Dance of Dragons. Now, Rhaenyra is the elder. Phaegon is the elder. Also, Rhaenyra, although you might think Dany and Rhaenyra are the parallels, they are not. Rhaenyra actually parallels Cersei. Rhaenyra has 3 bastard sons, one of whom is named Joffrey. And when she takes King's Landing, her rule is terrible. For like 6 months, it's very much misrule. It's very similar to Cersei's rule over King's Landing. And Cersei, of course, has 3 bastard children, one of whom is named Joffrey. There are it's not a one-to-one parallel, but Rhaenyra and Cersei have a lot of parallels. Rhaenyra also kind of descends into paranoia, unfortunately. Or at least so says Fire and Blood. Of course, some of that is, we don't know, whatever. So I think that the person that's going to get eaten by the dragon would not be Dany, because Dany obviously she's got stuff to do. Phaegon is probably not long for the world. And here's the other reason why I think Phaegon will be the one to get eaten by the dragon, like Rhaenyra did. The reason why I think that is because of the Syvas game. Tyrion is playing Phaegon in Syvas, and he's giving him bad advice about how to use the dragon. And then Tyrion uses his dragon to win the game, and he moves it across. And Tyrion is the black side. So Tyrion grabs his black dragon. It says he flies it across the board, and then he's like, death in 4. So 4 bites for the black dragon. For Rhaenyra, it was 6 bites, supposedly, leaving 1 for the stranger. So, yeah, I think that is a heavy foreshadowing. And that's when Phaegon flips the board. Pick up my pieces, dwarf. And makes Tyrion pick up the pieces. And Tyrion's like, I lied. Trust no one. Keep your dragons close, you know. So, yeah, I kind of think Drogon will eat Phaegon. Because Dany's got to slay the lie somehow of his identity. And if he tries to tame the dragon and the dragon eats him, then it's kind of like, it's not even saying you're not Targaryen, you're a Blackfyre. Because Blackfyres theoretically should be able to ride dragons too. They're Targs just as much as Targs. But it's more like you're not of the true metal. You know, you failed the test. So I think that's how Phaegon's story will end. It probably will be tragic. There's a lot of ways it could go, but I think that's where it's going. Hopefully it's not literally like Dany feeding him to her dragon in a scene that just makes us like, but maybe that's like George bringing her really close to the dark side. You know, maybe Phaegon does some horrific shit. And so she's like, well, screw you. I'm feeding you to my dragon. I mean, maybe. She crucified the slave lords after they crucified slave children. So, I mean, if Phaegon does something bad, then she could go harsh punishment, yeah. Oh, yeah, and Barristan could be involved, too. Barristan should be torn by this. If he thinks Phaegon is real, his loyalties will be divided. It could be that Barristan will figure it out, though, and help Dany slay the lie as well. Maybe he could ask questions, the right questions. I don't know. We'll see. By the way, Phaegon believes he's real. We figured this out. I've always wondered. He does think he's real. Because when Tyrion guesses his identity, he turns to Jon Connington, and he's like, he knows who I am. He doesn't say, oh, he figured out I'm Rhaegar's son. Wink, wink. Okay, if Phaegon knew that he wasn't Rhaegar's son and that he was an imposter, first of all, that would ruin his confidence. You'd want him to think he was real. And I think they did raise him that way. But if he knew he was a faker, then he wouldn't say that. He would have been like, oh man, he figured out I'm Rhaegar's son. If he said he knows who I really am, Jon Connington might be like, oh, he guessed that you're fake Rhaegar's son. You see what I'm saying? There would be 2 layers of deception. So no, when he says he knows who I am, he means he figured out I'm Rhaegar's son, which is what Phaegon believes he is. So that's kind of sad that Phaegon thinks that he's real and he's not. Yeah, you feel for him a little bit, but he's kind of a dick. So not that we should execute people or feed them to dragons for being kind of a dick. That's not fair. 3 Heads has the dragon, folks. So who will ride the dragons? That's what we're asking. 3 Heads has the dragon. It probably means 3 riders for 3 dragons, the prince that was promised and his crew. I've also talked about how 3 Heads has the dragon alludes to the mystery of the dragon bond. I don't want to get lost on that today. I talked about lemur theory in the Great Empire of the Dawn Iceberg stream, and you can also watch Daemon's Song, where I really got into lemur theory and the dragon bond, and how basically the way the dragon bond is created in part is by killing a Valyrian dragon lord, or killing, just say, a Valyrian that already has children with blood magic. We stuff that Valyrian into the dragon somehow. Then the children of that Valyrian have a way to bond, connect with the dragon because their grandfather or great-grandfather spirit or grandmother is in the dragon. And that's the 3rd head. So when Daemon is singing to Vermithor, there's a line that says, 2 heads to a 3rd sing. It's like, well, what's the 3rd head they're singing to? That would be the spirit inside the dragon. And I love this theory. I think it's pretty solid. I think lemur theory backs it up. But today we're just talking about who are going to be the riders. I see people I really don't think Jaime's going to be riding any. I thought about including Jaime, but I think that'd be pretty cheesy. Jaime and Cersei aren't Targs. The facts don't work. It would make sense. There's a good story you could write around that, but the facts don't work. Aerys is not near Joanna when they are conceived. He is near Joanna when Tyrion is conceived. So Tyrion could be a Targ. Jaime and Cersei, no chance that they are Targs. Despite the fact that they do incest, Despite the fact that Cersei is an obvious parallel to the Mad King with all the wildfire stuff going on, they are not Targs. And they can't be. Like I said, if you read The World of Ice and Fire, it makes it pretty clear. It's like it's heaping scorn on the one thing. It like makes it clear that they were not in the same place. And then goes out of its way to point out that Joanna and Aerys were. There was an incident between them that might have been an assault or harassment situation around the time when Tyrion would have been being conceived. So, Jaime, I didn't put on the list. Tyrion, I did. Jon is the most obvious one. Jon, it's kind of the point of RLJ. I mean, there's also a political angle to RLJ, but the main point is that Jon's a Targaryen, so he can ride dragons, and also so that he can, resolve the ancient sins of the past by being, both ice and fire or whatever. So Jon, RLJ, he's a Targaryen. Jon's obviously the other Azor High Reborn person. He dreams of wielding a red sword. He's leading the Watch, which is the right position for the last hero. The fact that he's a Targ and probably going to ride a dragon. I mean, it's not... This is in the don't overthink it category. I do believe that Jon's resurrection will have something to do or coincide with the return of the Red Comet. So he'll be reborn under a bleeding star. He will be the dragon woken from stone himself, I believe. Just with the white body being frozen and stone-like. I think that's part of it. Jon will probably be a fire white, which could make him a good dragon rider. If you think about it, this might even be an original Valyrian thing. He's going to be resurrected by the time he runs into a dragon. So he's either going to be... I don't think a dragon would like Cold Hands sitting on top of him, and I don't think Cold Hands could sit on a dragon because Cold Hands stays away from the fire. He's made of ice. He's frozen. Not made of ice, but frozen. So Jon being a fire white, or even like a better green seer resurrection if Bran's evolved, white, fully resurrected person maybe. The fire white thing, that could be part of Jon riding a dragon. And then, of course, he's also a skin changer. Cold Hands, I believe, is still using his skin changer magic to ride his elk, even though he's dead. So we should expect that Jon, after he's resurrected, will still be able to use skin changer magic. His wolf ghost, I believe, the spirit of ghost will be in Jon's body, and the wolf body will be dead, because Jon's spirit is in ghost, and it's merging with ghost's wolf spirit. So unless they get Jon's spirit out of there real quick, it's going to start zipping up with the wolf spirit, and they'll be inseparable. So to raise Jon, as I always say, we're going to need to move Jon's ghost and Ghost's ghost over to Jon's body, and the wolf body will die. So why would Jon then, what's he going to skin change? Well, I don't know. Maybe some birds, but I've also suggested that Ghost could be fire whited, and that Jon and Ghost will both be resurrected, and that would be sick. And I actually think that's a chance that could happen. And you get Ghost as a fire wolf instead of a dire wolf. His eyes already look like they're burning. So if Jon's skin changer magic isn't for like skin changing resed Ghost or whatever, it could help him bond with a dragon. So the fire white skin changer combination, like just think about the magic that's involved here. He's got fire magic in his body and he can communicate with animals. Do you see how this could help him ride a dragon? We might even be recreating original Dragon Bond stuff, just like with Dany figuring out how to hatch the eggs and ride the dragon from scratch. Jon being a fire white and a skin changer and actually crawling inside the dragon's head a little bit. That might have been part of the original process too. We've said that green seer magic might be how you spirit stuff Valyrian ancestors into dragons anyway. It probably is. So, yeah. Hellhound, yes. Firewolf, Hellhound. Thank you, Tim. I should say Hellhound. That's more accurate. Of course, there's lots of Hellhound symbolism. So, resurrected Ghost would be a Hellhound. And that'd be dope. So, Tyrion, like I said, could be a Targ. I'd say it's like 50-50, to be honest. He has dragon dreams, which is one of the reasons why I think he is possibly a Targ. He has many. He talks about dreaming of dragons as a kid and looking into the fires and pretending they were dragon fires, and he was burning his family and his enemies. And he dreams of battling with Barristan and Meleys the Monstrous, and dragons are flying around. And he's very obsessed with dragons. He dreams of them. He reads about them. And then Mokoro has that vision where he says to Tyrion, oh, I see many, many dragons, bright and dark, and you in the middle snarling, and it's like, well, it almost sounds like Tyrion is one of the dragons amongst all these dragons. He's certainly involved with dragons, and he has this knowledge, he's reading the old books. That's probably going to come in handy for Dany. He made Bran the special saddle, so he probably will help Dany come up with dragon saddles, which we know are important. But again, Dany's redoing everything from the ground up. So here's Tyrion to make her a saddle with his engineering skill. He's already made a special saddle. So, and it's what you'd need. Like the saddle he made for Bran is more like it holds him in there so he can't fall, because Bran can't use his legs to grab the horse's body, which is how you ride a horse. So the kind of saddle that Tyrion made for Bran is what you'd need for a dragon, meaning something that locks you in there. You're not going to ride the dragon really with your legs, like you're just holding on. So, yeah, so Tyrion's heterochromia, right? The one black eye could be dark purple, just like with Darkstar, and just like Jon's dark gray eyes could conceivably be a little purple, because gray and purple are very close when you're talking about eye color. Like, that's real close, actually. Think about like a pale lavender, it's almost gray. So, that's Tyrion. Oh, also no, there's more. There's another Scythe-ass foreshadowing. That's right. In the Winds of Winter preview chapter, a younkish slave captain comes in and tries to command the second sons to do something dumb, and they decide not to do it, and they decide to kill him instead. His body falls over the Scythe-ass board, knocks some pieces over, and bleeds all over everything. It's very discourteous and messy. And Tyrion picks up, this time, the white dragon Scythe-ass piece, but it's covered in blood, and the blood has run into the grooves of the wood. So it's a very cool symbol. It's obviously a white dragon symbol, so maybe Tyrion will ride Viserion. Or it's also turns into a weirwood symbol because it's a white wooden thing with blood running in its veins. So I'm not sure what that means. It's a pretty dope symbol, but the most obvious suggestion is that Tyrion might ride Viserion. He might do that knowing he's a Targaryen and figuring it out or something. I tend to think it's going to be like some momentary thing in the heat of battle where he'll hop, or maybe he's doing the saddle and he just accidentally gets on and the dragon takes off. It's like, oh. I don't think Tyrion's going to ride the dragon into battle over and over. And it's like, Tyrion's the third head of the dragon. I just think that George is going to give him a dragon ride because he's been dreaming about it. And Tyrion is George in a lot of ways. I think there'll be some wish fulfillment where Tyrion will get a dragon ride. Maybe he'll ride with somebody, or it'll be, like I said, in the heat of battle or when he's just working on the saddle. But I don't think he'll be ahead of the dragon in particular. Fagon, like I said, can't be ruled out. Blackfires can ride dragons too. That still doesn't mean he can't get eaten by a dragon. Maybe he'll get one of Dany's dragons and they'll go at a dragon fight and he'll lose and get eaten. Again, Dance of the Dragons was originally between Targaryens with dragons. So if Fagon doesn't get a dragon, then the only way we get a dragon fight is if Euron gets one and then fights Dany or Jon's dragon, or if one of the dragons is stolen by, the forces of ice, let's say, like on the show. We do need dragon fights. George didn't write Fire and Blood for nothing in between books 5 and 6. He did that to tell us what dragon fights are like, so we know what to expect. So we should expect the dragons to end up fighting somehow. So Fagon is the other person besides Euron who could get a dragon and then fight Dany. Euron is my most important pick for the actual third head of the dragon. I do think he's got all the Azor Ahai symbolism and Night King symbolism. He's just the evil version of it. He's got Bloodstone Emperor symbolism. He's a Valyrophile. He collects the Valyrian armor. He's got Dragonbinder. He's been to Valyria. He's got people with Valyrian swords under his command. So he's really setting himself. And then he's talking about the red comet signaling the time when he becomes a god man. That's all Azor Ahai stuff. So he really should ride a dragon. Like, he's got everything else except for the dragon. And, he's got a horn that's supposed to bind dragons and a plan to use it to get a dragon. So, yeah, obviously Euron's going to try to steal a dragon. He probably will succeed. So he probably will steal a dragon and ride one. Yeah, I think that will happen. The question is, will he do that as himself? Or will he do that after he's been friggin' body snatched by the Great Other or something. And also, if original Azor Ahai Reborn spirit is in the Weirwood Net or the Ether, which I think it is, as Night King, which is the Great Other, same thing, I do believe there's a chance he could be looking to get back into somebody's body. So if he body snatches Euron, that would literally be Azor Ahai reborn into Euron's body. And wouldn't that be fun for George to play with the concept of Azor Ahai reborn by showing us a body snatched Euron riding a stolen dragon? Also, Euron sails to Westeros from Ahai. That's what the Bloodstone Emperor does, according to my Great Empire of the Dawn theory. The Great Empire of the Dawn comes to Westeros and lands on the Iron Islands, maybe Casterly Rock, but definitely Old Town and Starfall. And that's what Euron does. He comes from Ahai, sails to Westeros, the Iron Islands, and now they're headed down to Old Town, where he's going to proclaim himself king. So this is all Bloodstone Emperor Echo stuff. So yeah, he's got to get a dragon. I really think so. And the last thing is, there could be a frozen dragon situation. Euron stealing Viserion could turn into a Night's King frozen dragon thing. I don't want to get too lost, but Euron has a lot of Night King symbolism. It's just a question if that's symbolism or if it becomes literal. He might try to take control of the others. He might get body snatched by an entity who will control the others. That's more likely. So if he steals a dragon, that dragon could end up frozen. That could end up your ice dragon. And it probably will be Viserion, because Viserion has all the ice dragon symbolism. And I'll also remind you that Queen Alysanne, who was a Night's Queen figure, flew her ice dragon symbol, the Silver Wing, and landed at the top of the high tower one time and fanned the flames up. So at some point, yes, Viserion, another ice dragon symbol, named after Visenya, a Night's Queen figure, just like Alysanne, yes, Viserion will fly to the high tower and land atop the high tower. That is where Euron will claim Viserion. The question is, will it be Euron? What will be the context? But that will happen. I promise you. Viserion landing on top of the high tower and Euron claiming him. Now we've got, it's time to talk about this. So look, Dany's plot line in the don't overthink it category is heading to her burning the others. One of the things that did not make sense about the TV show was Dany saving the world on the way to going mad while trying to take the throne. Very cogent and logical person, self-sacrificing. She could have stayed in the south like Cersei did, but she took her armies up north and fought the others as far north as she could to save as many people as she could, which is very consistent with who Daenerys is. And 2 weeks later, she mass murdered thousands of people in King's Landing, because that's what heroes do. No, not only did that not fit the character, it didn't make sense as a climax, okay? They very clearly were more interested, and I know it's dumb, I'm not ragging on it for no reason, I'm making a point. So they wanted Cersei versus Dany as their climax because those are the two most popular characters, and that's what you do with TV. It makes a certain amount of sense. It just doesn't work with Ice and Fire. They didn't know what to do with the White Walker stuff. They minimized all that, and they played up the Cersei-Dany thing. So in their mind, the climax was the Battle of the Mad Queens. It's like, why have one slightly offensive sexist trope when you can have just two of them? Make them fight, and then kill them both. That's what we call television. It's subverting expectations. Yeah, okay, sorry. I was getting carried away. But point is, in the books, it's pretty clear the Iron Throne is not as important as the battle against the others. That's the whole friggin' point of making fun of the Game of Thrones as a squabbling over a chair when the real threat to the whole kingdom and the entire world is in the north. So there's absolutely no chance that Dany's plot arc is going to run the way it does in the show, where she goes north and handles all the business and the White Walkers are done, and then she marches down to King's Landing. That's not fucking going to happen. Doesn't make any sense. And we saw it not make sense. So have to think Dany's plot ends in the north. Also, we're told that George said that Bran will be the final king of the story. We don't know if he'll be exactly Iron Throne King or what that means. I have ideas about that, which I shared in the White Walker stream. Basically, he downloads the entire Weirwood Net. There's no more green seers touching trees anymore. Sam helps him write down real history, and he's probably the last king of Westeros. He has no children, and after him, they probably break it back up into smaller kingdoms or make a senate or something. So, point is, Dany's plot is she's not going to end the story as queen. And I don't think she's going to end the story dying while trying to take the throne either. She's probably going to die in the north, saving the world. That makes more sense as the resolution of her plot, and it fits all the symbolic foreshadowing. So, for example, I just mentioned the dream about the trident, where she's fight either Robert's enemies, but they turn into others, ice-armored warriors. She burns them down, and then it's like, this is how it was meant to be. This is great. This feels right. Okay, so it's definitely something she'll be doing. I would suggest that the Trident River is probably the wall, where she's sort of flying over the wall and burning them, but whatever. Also, if the wall comes down and melts, it says turns the trident into a torrent. You might have a river where the wall used to be. So Dany has her trident dream, but it's really fighting the others. Then there's this big parallel with Dany burning slave masters and freeing whites that I figured out, and this is one of my best finds, I think, is supposed to parallel the idea of Dany burning others to free whites who are like slaves. The whites, their souls can't rest. They're trapped in their bodies and being forced against their will to murder their countrymen and stuff by the others who are like the slave lords. So Dany, before she goes and burns the slave masters and frees the Unsullied, she says it's time to cross the trident. And it was right before that, shortly before that she had that dream of burning others at a dream trident. Okay? So now we've got this idea that these three events are all parallel. The trident battle against the others, and then Dany crossing her own trident to burn the slave masters and free the Unsullied. The Unsullied, in turn, are described as having dead eyes and being like brick men, stone men. So they're kind of mindless. Their names are taken. They'll hurt themselves if they do whatever you tell them, like robots. So they are effectively like human whites. And that's how they are described language-wise. And then obviously the slave masters, there's one line where it says, Dany's talking to a younkish slave lord, and she says he wore a white smile such as Krasny's Monaclaws had worn before Drogon burned his face off, which I love. It's like my favorite line. It's so metal. And there's Krasny's Monaclaws getting his face burned off by Drogon. Yes, they deserve to die, and I hope they rot in hell. Anyway, so a white smile, just, little wordplay to imply the smile of someone who controls whites, makes slaves, makes Unsullied. So yeah, there you go. It's a good parallel. And the Trident Dream suggests that Dany's abolitionist identity of burning slave masters to free slaves will conclude with her burning the others to set the whites free from bondage, which is pretty awesome. And that's something worth dying for, is it not? Like if she goes out setting all the whites free from spiritual captivity, like that's the ultimate emancipation or abolitionist act. So in this way, her sort of storyline plot and her magical plot end up working out and kind of doing the same thing. And now, this is really hammered home when we get to the House of the Undying. And I think I missed some artists, so let me go back real quick. This one is by David Sondered. This Burning White Walker is by Arka Idri. And this one is by Joshua Kairos. I think I said that. So Joshua Kairos, Arka Idri, and David Sondered. Emancipation Incineration. How will Dany die? And I'm mostly zeroing in on this from the point of like the magic things that need to be done, that need to be accomplished. So setting the whites free somehow, not just burning the others, but maybe like whatever's at the heart of winter, So let's talk about the Undying, because that's what's suggested. This one is by Travis Kohler. And actually, I want to do the Lauren Cannon one first. This is Lauren Cannon. So the Undying, the real Undying, once she finds them, they are cold blue shadows. That's how they're described, cold blue shadows. Now, the others are obviously called white shadows, and they're cold. Their swords, though, are like blue-white. They're icy. So there's going to be a blue tint to them. So cold blue shadows definitely makes us think of the others. They're sitting around a cold blue shadow heart. And that makes us think of the heart of winter, which is theoretically the center of the other's power. Because remember, it has a mystical association. Bran is having his dream. The last thing, he looks north and north into the heart of winter, and then he cries out in terror. And then Bloodraven is like, that's now you know why you must live. Whatever Bran saw in the heart of winter was terrifying. There's something about the power of the others that is there. A couple of artists have drawn a big frozen weirwood tree. I'm guessing it's a frozen weirwood tree, and it's going to have some oily black stone as well. I'm guessing we'll find both of those things in the heart of winter. Maybe it'll be Big White Castle with White Castle burgers for all the guests. Guess right. Meat and salt, bread and salt. But yeah, the House of the Undying, not only does it have a blue shadow heart surrounded by cold blue shadows, the entire building is inside the grove of shade trees. So just as you go through like the haunted forest and all the weirwoods when you go north, we're going into this garden of shade trees, and then we're finding the others and the heart of winter. So it's a really good parallel. And then, of course, what happens? Drogon burns their face off. He burns the shadow heart and sets the Undying afire. And they burn like whites. They go up like kindling. And then the whole temple collapses, and Dany hightails it out of there, and Pyapri goes mad. So, So what does this foreshadow? It foreshadows Dany going into the heart of winter with Drogon, or with Jon and Drogon, or with whoever, and burning some shit in the heart of winter that breaks the power of the others. So, yeah, if there's a frozen weirwood tree, just set it on fire. If it's oily black stone, I don't know, carve a kraken out of it. Carve a sheep out of it. Maybe something nicer than a kraken. You got dragons, so probably it means burning stuff. The last, okay, couple ideas here. The others, they're vampires. They want to possess Daenerys. When she wakes up, they're sucking and biting. So do the others want to possess Daenerys? I'll talk about Night's Queen Daenerys in a minute, but I just want to show you this Simonetti artwork here, Palace of Dust. It's the best Undying artwork. It's just sick, but I'll get back to that. So the others are trying to, the Undying are trying to vampire Dany. They're trying to bite and suck. Okay, not only biting on the neck like a vampire, sucking at her eye, just the very action of consuming and sucking. Dany's a magical person, and these magical beings, who of course sustain their lives unnaturally, like vampires, they're feeding on her. It's feeding on her magic, one would assume. It's kind of hilarious how they just ignored the dragon, as if he would just stand there and do nothing. That was poor planning. Worst lovers ever. Yeah. Like, dude, you're kissing me like a cold shadow. What is this? Ugh. It implies that the others have a vampirous intent. Maybe they just feed off Dany's energy. Maybe they want to turn her into a Night's Queen, like they want to get Jon and turn him into a Night's King. But yeah, that's an important thing. And the last part is the hand canopy. So this is where we get to the weirwood net stuff. And this is probably to answer your question about how is Dany going to die? How is her death going to free the whites? All this, you guys, I'm not talking about weirwood net stuff today, but you guys know that I believe Nissa was a child of the forest, or a hybrid child of the forest, or a female green woman, or something like that. A weirwood woman. Azor Ahai, according to my theory, he killed Nissa not just to forge Lightbringer. It may not have even been part of it at all. It was to get inside the weirwood net, because he was sort of essentially breaking into the weirwood net. So Nissa is implied as going into the weirwood net as well. That's why Dany wanders around the Green Sea. That's why Jon has a vision of Ygritte melting into blood and bone in the pond in front of the weirwood tree. Ygritte is Jon's Nissa, and she's turning into blood and bone, which is the color of the weirwood, but also disintegrating into the pond, so melting into the sea. Just like Dany's in the Green Sea, right? And she's reborn in the sea. So there's lots of stuff that suggests Nissa killed by Azor Ahai, not the end of her story. She goes into the weirwood net because she's a child of the forest, and that's what happens when they die. They go into the weirwood net, but she's special, and her death is special. So she kind of like becomes the new weirwood net that Azor Ahai inhabits. That's what the symbolism suggests. Here's the symbolism. Right before Dany wakes up and is getting vampired by the Undying, her last vision is of the slaves that she will free a book later. And she sees 1,000 blood-stained hands reaching up to her, crying for her. And I think it says Mhysa, I'm not sure. Mother, maybe. I'm not sure if that's in there or not. But it says they reached out for her. They needed the fire, they needed the life. And it says Dany reached out her arms and gave herself to them. Feeling their need, Dany's basic instinct, which is what you do in a dream, if she feels thousands of people needing her, she just gives herself to them, is an indication of her character, first and foremost. But the symbolism of 1,000 blood-stained hands is very intentional because the weirwood leaves are always, always, always described as bloody hands. And in the first description, it's 1,000 blood-stained hands. In the Catelyn chapter in the Godswood, 3rd chapter of Game of Thrones, 1,000 blood-stained hands. It's 2 messages at once. One is a foreshadowing of what she's about to do by giving her everything she has to freeing these slaves. And then the scene where they reach up to her and say, Mhysa, Mhysa. That's the scene that she is seeing. However, the reason why the weirwood symbolism is there is because, of course, the others and their ability to enslave the whites is all running through the weirwood magic. The key to breaking the others' power and freeing the whites from bondage is no doubt going to have to do with the weirwood net, because that is where their power comes from. So Drogon burning that shadow heart and breaking the power of the Undying, you see why I think Dany might be like melting a frozen weirwood or something, at least in the outside world. But then, like I said, her death may involve going into the weirwood net, just as Nissa did. That might be a healing action that balances out the weirwood net, or it might be Dany becoming the ultimate mother goddess and sort of dissolving into nature as like a suitable fitting place for her and all the service that she's done. She gets to be like a nature goddess, a nature spirit. It could be that there's like actual stuff in the weirwood net that needs to be done. You know what I mean? Like Jon, Dany, and or Bran could all end up with their spirits walking around on the astral plane doing shit. That's maybe a little far-fetched, but it's possible. But yeah, the idea is like it's simultaneously a weirwood canopy and the hands of the unsullied enslaves that she will free. But we've already seen that those unsullied enslaves parallel the whites, and the whites are tied to the weirwood magic. So you see how this all makes sense. Dany sort of falling into the weirwood canopy, and it says, oh, they needed her life and her fire, and she gave it to them. It sounds like Dany giving up her life and her fire and her spirit and sort of going into the trees in order to free the slaves, who are the whites. So I'm not sure how that physically works out, to answer your question, devoted to Mariah. But those are the clues about there being a weirwood net finishing point for whatever Dany's got to do. Because that's how you free the whites and break the power of the others. It's got to have something to do with the frozen side of the weirwood net. You know, you want ridiculous, baby? Check this out. Dany is as much Blackwood as Bloodraven, who is a green seer. That's right. Bloodraven has 1 Blackwood parent and 1 Targaryen parent, as does Dany's grandparents, who then committed incest for 2 generations. So Dany, we meant in the chat. No, I appreciate you, baby. I assumed you were just teasing me anyway. But Dany is half Blackwood as much as, okay? So the idea that she could have a connection to the weirwood net, she might not need any Blackwood blood. It might just be a completely new magical bond that's formed by whatever she does. But it could be that her Blackwood blood will tie into this. And maybe Bloodraven will even communicate with her before he passes, you know. Let me go back one. I skipped something. I got into Night's Queen Dany a little ahead of time. We'll come back to that. There's one more scene that's almost like a dream vision. It's not quite. It's something that Dany does, but it works like a dream vision. So when she's out in the Dothraki plain, sick and delirious, before the worst day, she sleeps next to a well and a little bit of tumbled down wall that she finds. And when she wakes up, the ants are all over her. Remember this, they're all over her. They're biting her scalp, or biting her skin, Cleo. It sucks. It really sucks. And so she wakes up and starts brushing them off. She's stomping them and, you know, whatever. And she's got bites all over her. And she's like, oh, where did they come from? It turned out their hive was on the other side of the little tumble down wall. And she thinks to herself, well, to the ants, that must be as big as the wall of Westeros. And Viserys used to brag about it as if he built it, And so basically you get this vision of the others coming over the wall to attack Daenerys, and then Daenerys responding by crossing back over the wall and stomping down all the ants. So there's several things here. The ants are a hive mind. The others seem to be a hive mind. The others are probably going to climb up the wall with ice spiders. They might do that, or they might just ride the ice spiders. Maybe the wall breaks and they come through. I don't know. But the ants climbing over the walls, obviously meant to make us think of ice spiders. And of course, Jon's dream, his foemen are scuttling up the ice like spiders. So George is directly suggesting that something about ice spiders is about climbing the wall. So now we've got these ants like spider others climbing over the wall. Their hive is on the other side, so that's the heart of winter. And Dany's got to go there. She's got to figure out, where do they come from? Oh, the other side of the wall. Let's go find it. So that's like super obvious foreshadowing. And just as in with the Undying, where she kicks ass, she again kicks ass. Like she just, they're just ants, whatever. Now, the next couple paragraphs, I don't want to get too into it, but there's some interesting symbolism that comes up. Dawn is mentioned twice, obliquely. This is all happening at sunrise. And then she noticed all she has to drink is the morning dew. So we talked about Danu and the dew. So there's a reference to Danu, essentially. Thanks for the tip there, Scott. And as well as like dawn. Remember, I said the stalks of milk glass are compared to dawn, as well as the Dothraki with their blades like shining razor glass. So these shining blades of grass have been used to mirror dawn, which is a blade of milk glass, just like the ghost grass. I mean, look, dawn might be a harvested piece of ghost grass. It's not impossible. Dawn swords might just grow out of the ground in a shy, and that's the milk. I mean, it's described exactly the same way. A stalk of milk glass, pale and glowing with the spirits of the damned. So milk glass is a kind of opaque white glass. If you think about your grandparents' old, fancy, like, plates and stuff, and it's like white and shiny and kind of milky looking, that's milk glass. So it just looks like, almost like opalescent, slightly shimmery white glass. That's what the bones of the others look like. That's what dawn looks like. It's not transparent, but there's a lot of light play with it. I think it's like opalescent is the word. So Dany crosses the wall, stomps them down. This is more foreshadowing of Dany going to the heart of winter, crossing the wall. So then she sees, like I said, sunrise. She sees a few last stars, and she thinks maybe one of them is Drogo's fiery stallion in the Nightlands. But the thing is, Drogo's star is the red comet. That's his fiery stallion. We saw that at the Drogo's pyre ritual. So she's basically, right as she crosses the wall and fights the others, she's like, oh, there's Drogo's star. There's the red comet. And then she's like, oh, it's dawn. And there's morning dew. So there's a lot of symbolism coming that all sounds like the War for the Dawn stuff and the red comet coming back and all that. Then she starts walking south, meaning like maybe back to Winterfell or something, or back into the Green Sea, as in into the Weirwood Net. Then she eats those damn green berries and gets green sick. So this is another clue that Dany could be going into the Weirwood Net, or at least making a Weirwood Net connection of some kind. She's eating those green berries, and then she gets green sick. And of course, green sick is the same thing, same term used for Jojen when he gets sick and has his visions. So there's more in that chapter. We should do a chapter reread of Dany's last chapter soon so we can get into all the detail, but you can see how that idea complements the red hand canopy part of the Undying Dream, where she's falling into the canopy and giving herself to it. So Night Queen Dany, there's a couple ways it could happen. First of all, the others want to possess her, so maybe they possess her for a while and it's really bad, and then she's freed of possession. This is the only way I could ever see a Nissa sword stabbing happen, is if stabbing her with a flaming sword frees her from other possession. Apart from that, I don't see it happening. And I don't think that's likely. But again, they needed the fire. The others are vampiric. So maybe this is a reference to the others wanting her fire. Original Nissa, this is the biggest one, may have become Night's Queen. There's a lot of clues about that we've been working with on our live streams lately. So Dany as the chief Nissa symbol. This is also by Zarori, by the way, just like the cover image. Zarori. And yes, it's awesome. It's really pretty. You almost want it to happen just because it's so pretty. Okay, so the last reason why there could be a Night's Queen Dany is because there could be a scenario where Jon and Dany have to both give themselves to the others in order to fulfill the ancient pacts and in order to essentially lead them back into the weirwood nets, back into the astral plane. Now think about this. Dany doesn't just free the Unsullied, she takes command of them and then leads them around. The only scenario where Jon and Dany get to ride off into the sunset together would be as if they're riding off into the cold sunset together. Jon and Dany are not going to have the normal happy ending. We all know that. They're both self-sacrificial characters. They're not just going to get to be a happy couple forever and ever. However, it could be that they have to, like I said, give themselves to the others in order to pacify the others. One of the clues about this is that Dany, like I said, takes control of the Unsullied, doesn't just free them. So what would be the parallel? How could Dany lead the Whites? She's probably not going to take over the army of the Whites and then, lead them against Westeros as a Night's Queen antagonist. I mean, maybe, but I don't think there's time for all that. There's not. So I think the way that Dany would lead the Whites, that would parallel her leading the Unsullied, would be, yes, leading them back into the Green Sea. Exactly. So she gives up her life and goes into the weirwood net, goes into nature itself. She would be leading the spirits of the Whites back into nature as well, because so their souls can rest. That's where they belong, in the rocks and trees and things. And so this is a final mother goddess action. It's very Kali-like. It's the warm bosom of the dark mother that we return to when we die. So Dany's there in the spirit world. Some of this will be implied, to lead the Whites back into the Green Sea so they can rest. So it would be awesome. That to me is, I want to see something like that implied thematically, because that would be the perfect resolution of all the mother goddess stuff and all the abolitionist stuff, as if it is implied that she is in fact leading the souls of these poor, tortured folks back into the nether realm. What if Dany goes back to Essos? I really don't think that's going to happen, man. I think that is just wishful thinking. It could make sense. I'm not saying it can't make sense. I think all this has a magical climax. I'm not really seeing the foreshadowing for something like that. And I just don't, it's like lower, it's like it's beneath her at that point. She doesn't need to rule somewhere. That's us who wants Dany to sit on the throne and be a good queen and have children. And that's not her role in the story. Everything about this, she sacrificed her baby to wake dragons, okay? Her purpose is to bring this fire, to burn away the evil and the rot, to bring the light, and to pave the way for a dream of spring. So when it says dragons don't plant trees, I want to point out that Dany does plant trees. She does it twice. She does it in Vaes Toloro, and she does it in Meereen. So she might not be there to grow the tree and pick the fruit, but everywhere she goes, she plants seeds for things. And like I said, I think she's going to leave Slaver's Bay in a better shape, with the Dosh Kalin in a better place, Dothraki culture in a better place, Slaver's Bay culture in a better place, Westeros not frozen and dead. So she's going to plant all kinds of seeds. I just don't think she's going to be around to grow them. I think that is us that wants that. Yeah, exactly. She doesn't need a throne, though. Her duty is much higher than that. Her purpose is much higher than that. She saved the friggin' world. I think Bran and Jon will help, too. But, yeah. There you go. Because she's a secret Stark. I don't even know what that means. So, yeah. Already showed this one. Talked about that. And yeah, this is my cold sunset. So this is Goddess Daenerys. And obviously this isn't Emilia Clarke Daenerys, but I got no problem with that because Emilia Clarke is awesome. Fought for Dany's character time and time again on the set. Read the books. Understood Dany way better than Dave and Dan. And also, of course, had like a brain aneurysm or a stroke or something while she was filming. Dude, Emilia's awesome. So I love all the Dany art that looks like Emilia. I just want to say that. Usually I do not use art too much of the show characters, but Dany and Emilia, I always I'm happy to mix it all up. So here is Emilia, and I also love that winter coat, to be honest. I thought that was dope. I'd wear that shit. Someone buy one for me on Etsy. She is a treasure. So here's Dany. This is the Night's Queen Dany that's like welcoming the whites home, right? Something like that. This artwork is by Anna Pazinik. So the last thing I want to talk about is the Song of Ice and Fire. And that's Jon and Dany. What's that going to be like? What is the Jon and Dany relationship? Oh, don't leave yet, Gabe. How's that going to go? Are they going to have hot zombie sex? Gabe, don't leave. Don't leave, I'm telling you. Jon's going to be undead, and Dany might be undead. So if they have sex, it kind of makes sense that they're both be undead, because otherwise it'd be weird. Now, there's small chance that the Green Seers will be involved in Jon's resurrection. Yeah, I see you're here. I got you. You had me at zombie sex. It's possible that the Green Seers will get involved and that Jon's body will be restored to life. Remember, Beric is not living. He's a reanimated corpse, piloted by fire magic and part of Beric's ghost. Okay? He's repossessed himself. So yeah, a small chance Jon could be fully resurrected to flesh and blood status. Hey, Dany, like he's good looking still, doesn't look dead, can have blood flow to his extremities. Okay? Follow what I'm saying? But if not, if he is more like a white, then the only way him and Dany could do any sex stuff would be if she was dead too. And at that point, the sex stuff seems unnecessary or more likely just magical. And I think that really what we're going to get here, guys, and this is my main point, I think the point here is that Jon and Dany are going to have mostly an emotional, and it might be romantic, but less sexual in their connection. Because if you think about it, they have a lot of shared values. Like I said, they're both very self-sacrificial. They are very empathetic. They see the view of the downtrodden, and they take it, and they fight for it. And they stand in the breach. And they're bound to admire that in each other. Dany, after the experience of potentially thinking that she's found some family finally with Fagon, but then finding out he's a lie, will be heartbroken. But now it turns out she does have family in the world. And Jon, too, aches for family and doesn't have it. So I really think there's a lot of reasons why they will be drawn to each other that don't necessarily have anything to do with, boat sex and hanky-panky and all that. So the whiting might not really even come into it. It really just matters, again, how, what is Jon's head like when he comes back? That defines the nature of any relationship he could have with Dany. But I think the thing it's going to echo is Rhaegar and Lyanna. Rhaegar and Lyanna, newsflash, were in love, in my opinion. I don't think there was any kidnapping. Lyanna is very strong-willed and independent-minded, and it seems if she went along with Rhaegar, then she did it because she agreed with his motives, not because she was deceived or bamboozled by his heart playing. No, she has this very perceptive comment about Robert, where even 14-year-old Lyanna, she's like, no, Robert's not going to stay in one bed. I know his nature. That's a very perceptive thing to say for a 14-year-old. So not to erase her 14-year-old status. She's young, but she's very perceptive. She's wild. She's probably a skin changer that just didn't have a wolf, riding the horses like a centaur, her and Brandon. So it's probably, and I went into all this in the Aegon's prophecy, but it's almost, to me, the picture that's here is the Starks and the Targaryens periodically reestablish their partnership. And the original partnership is Torrhen Stark and Aegon, the Conqueror. And the main reason why Torrhen knelt and didn't fight is because Aegon told him about his prophecy. And the prophecy involved the others. And Torrhen Stark and Brandon Snow were like, oh, shit, the others. Yeah, we know about that. How do you know about that? You had a dream? You're supposed to use your dragons to fight them. They're made of ice. The dragons breathe fire. This seems like a good ally. So, again, check out the Aegon's prophecy videos, Cleo. I did one, why Torrhen knelt, and then what Lyanna told Ned. And essentially what I'm saying is that when Rhaegar and Lyanna ran off, part of the reason why Rhaegar was able to convince Lyanna is because this prophecy involves the Starks. It involves the North. It involves the White Walkers and things that the Starks believe in and understand and know to be true. So it's almost certain that what you have with Rhaegar and Lyanna is some sort of romantic relationship that's based around prophetic need, which is very sexy. By the way, when you're two people that are thrown into a situation with dire circumstances and the fate of the world and prophetic purpose. And like, yeah, that's romantic. They're going to bond over that. And they're both sexy people. So whatever. Age gap. Well, yeah, we don't like it. It's, the modern audience. But yeah, exactly. Whatever. We're still looking. So I think Jon and Dany will be something similar where they're going to share a mutual understanding of this prophetic need and purpose. They're going to have come about this knowledge in different ways, but at some point they'll be sharing their knowledge, and I'm trying to wrap this up for you, Gabe. They'll be sharing their knowledge and collaborating on how to defeat the others. Bran will bring his knowledge in. Dany's been using the candle. Jon's been reading Colloquo Votar and maybe getting in touch, having cool dream visions while he's dead and talking to Lyanna's ghost, maybe. I mean, when Jon finishes his crypt stream, he probably will speak to Lyanna's ghost. And what would Lyanna's ghost possibly have to say to Jon besides, "I love you, son," which will be very therapeutic. God, I want that for Jon. I really do. Now that I think about it, just an "I love you" would be good, Lyanna. You are wanted, son. I feel healed for Jon's behalf. The other thing she would want to tell him about is why he's the prince that was promised. Why her and Rhaegar did this. Why I'm so proud of you, son. Yes. Something. You did the right thing with the wildlings, buddy. Chat, type in your best encouragement for Jon that you'd like to hear Lyanna say. So the whole point is, the information that Jon would need is something about the prince that was promised, the importance of him being a Targaryen. You need to help save the world. Okay, so yeah, I think that's coming. So Jon and Dany's, whatever connection they have, it should be based on shared values, found family for two people who desperately want family, and this shared prophetic need. So I don't know if they'll bang or not. I kind of don't care that much. I think this relationship will be based on all the stuff that I just told you and their heroism. So the last thing to say about this is, will Dany have a baby? People ask all the time. So basically, there's two scenarios here. If there's a no magic ending where the dragons are gone and the others are gone and we're moving towards that was the last gasp of magic, then there shouldn't be any more Targaryens either. There shouldn't be skin changers. There shouldn't be Targaryens. So in that case, no baby. If Dany is resurrected, then the only kind of baby she could have would be a magic baby. So maybe there's a magic baby thing that's got to be given to the others. That's kind of horrible. Dany already lost one baby. I don't want her to give another baby to magic. I don't know that George would write that. Yeah, maybe they make a shadow baby together and we never actually see a child get sacrificed. They just have fire white sex and make a shadow being. That seems too ridiculous and high fantasy too. Now, if the ending we get is more like, oh yeah, the magic's all gone, except for there might be a little bit left. You can see like, oh, there's a couple dragon's eggs. There's a blue star in the distance in the cold. You're like, oh God. Or there's some hint that the others could come back, right? If that's the case, then Dany and Jon should have a baby, because that way we know that if the others ever rise again, there'll be the Dragon Lords will be there to fight the good fight, right? So that's the scenario where they have a kid. I don't think anybody will have skin changer magic, Jenny, after the Weirwood Net is shut down. So Bran's going to download the hive mind out of the Weirwood Net, and I think that's actually the fulcrum of all the skin changer power too. So I don't think that, or at least I think there is a possibility that if George wants a no magic ending, he could write it that the Weirwood Net shuts down all the skin changer magic, period. Okay, he's pointing out that Fagon represents all the trappings of Targaryen power symbolically. He probably has black fire, the name Aegon, he's male, he'll have the crown, maybe even he'll have the throne. Well, Dany has the realistic power. She's got the dragons and army, Dragonstone. Do these two contracts set up for the perfect team between them? Yes. What will happen is that, just like with Stannis and Renly, we'll see the potential for a team up, but it'll be sabotaged. So we'll be like, the road not taken, essentially. Yeah, I can see that, Audrey. I definitely do think Dany's got to come around and reckon with the Mad King's legacy, and that'll be in King's Landing. That's why it's appropriate that she accidentally sets off the wildfire. It's like, oh, she's tripping over the legacy of her ancestors and having to work through it, which is kind of her whole thing. Yeah, will all the dragons die? Probably. Yeah, I would think so. I would say the dragons and the others will be gone. I strongly think that'll be the case. If there is anything left, it'll be an egg or, something that could spark a future thing, but not a current thing. Does Jon Con think Aegon is Trugon or Fagon? He probably thinks he's true. Also, thanks for the wonderful and mindful content, Bebe. So I think, sorry for doxing you. I think that Jon Con thinks Fagon is real, and he's going to find out that he's fake, and it's going to drive him crazy. And he's going to do some crazy shit. He's going to hear the bells, and there's going to be lots of crazy with Jon Con. Lots of wildfire, lots of resentment, and lots of crazy. That's what's in King's Landing. So there could be multiple wildfire disasters, like I said, with Jon Con and Cersei, even before Dany attacks. Cersei and Jon Con are both like foreshadowed to cause heavy destruction. Zia Tapatara, and this one is by Boss Logic. So here's another Jon and Dany. So here's the thing. The Song of Ice and Fire is a song. A song has to have, I guess you could sing a song by yourself, but usually music is a harmonization of multiple notes, right? That's usually what a song is. So, yeah, Jon and Dany, they together are remember when Rhaegar says, oh, his is the Song of Ice and Fire, talking about the prince that was promised? Well, if they're both the prince that was promised, then the Song of Ice and Fire is actually Jon and Dany's song. And it'll be what they sing together to save the world. So this is like a chemical romance here, guys. That is our theory, Iceberg. And I appreciate y'all.